All right, I'd like to call to order the Malibu Planning Commission regular meeting of May 16th, 2022. No Zoom, but we're coming back to it at our next meeting. At least that's the plan. Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Here.
Commissioner Mazza,
Here.
Commissioner Wetton,
Here.
Vice Chair Smith,
Here.
Chair Hill.
And I'm here.
You have a quorum.
And how about an approval of the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the agenda as staff recommends with item 5A, move to a date uncertain.
I'll second it.
We have a second. Can I just ask, Rebecca, do we have any significant number of public speakers on any of the items? No huge numbers? Okay. In that case, shall we call the roll on the approval of the agenda?
Commissioner Mazza,
Yes.
Commissioner Wetton,
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings,
Yes.
Vice Chair Smith,
Yes.
Chair Hill.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And now on to a report on the posting of the agenda, please.
The agenda for this meeting was properly posted on May 6, 2022.
Thank you. There being no ceremonial presentations, we move on to item 2A, written and oral communications from the public.
You want to do the flag?
I think we'd want to vote on that. I think we've in the past voted not to.
Okay.
For various reasons, I suppose. Oh, okay, so we're getting speaker slips now. Moving too fast for you, huh? Just one. All right, Mr. Norm Haney, welcome.
Good evening, Honorable Planning Commissioners. By the way, I do think that we ought to say a pledge to the flag. I'll leave that up to you, of course. But in these days of challenges, I think it's appropriate. The reason that I asked to speak tonight is if any of you had the opportunity, I know someone up there did, to watch the city council meeting last week where there was a public hearing, and it was held in this forum. And it was dynamic, it was emotional, and the questions and answer between the applicants, the people opposed, the people in favor, went very, very smoothly. And I think we should do that. I think we should continue having in-person meetings. You all up there are protected with plexiglass dividers. I'm a long ways away from you. And I think it's a good idea. And I don't understand why we're doing in Zoom meetings in the future. Last weekend, I went to Seattle, and I flew on Alaska. And they didn't require masks. And everyone was fine. The flight went off very well, and it seems to me like if the airlines can do it, we ought to be able to do it as well. Those are my comments. The meeting will go much faster, much smoother, and the interchange between the planning commissioners and the applicants, as well as the people that are opposed, will be much more dynamic and direct. Thank you for your time.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
thank
Haney.
you for your service.
Are there no other speakers from the public wishing to speak? If not, then we'll move on to item 2B, Planning Commission and staff comments and inquiries. Who'd like to go first? John's got a hand up.
Yes, first I'd like to echo Norm's comment. I've had a lot of people tell me, oh, gee, it's so easy just to call in. But we don't have the participation we used to have. And the city needs participation right now. There's a lot of things happening. And I, as a planning commissioner, welcome the ability to directly engage the applicants and the staff, because these are complicated things that are very hard, at least for me, to do over a little tiny camera. The other comment is a question for Richard, and that is, unbelievably, I've gotten a lot more comments about the radio tower being painted red and white and looking like the old restaurant Nantucket Light, or the real Nantucket Light. And I just wondered if there's been any progress in at least painting part of it a different color. And that's my comments.
Okay, thank you, John. Anybody else?
I'll go.
Dennis.
Good evening. Just a couple of things. Yes, I went to the council meeting, and it was wonderful to be in this building and be with everybody and to just engage and during break and talk to people and be what we are as a city, with us coming together for just a simple meeting like that. And it was, to me, was a lot. Being here tonight, obviously for me, is a lot, but all of us being able to be here and look at our applicant and being able to talk to him is a big deal. So I'm way all in favor of all that whenever that can come back. The second thing is, I know that we're trying to put some money in our budget to try and hire people in, I guess mostly in Richard's department, but I want people to remember that we have some really good employees in this building that work very hard, and I hope they will too be recipients of whatever kind of money that is going to be in that budget, so we can hang on to the good people that have been through everything, and 2 years later they're still here, they're still working hard, and I hope that they're thought of. And then, thank you. And then for me tonight, on top of being special, this is my 200th meeting that I have either gone to or been a part of. And there are only 3 other gentlemen in this room that have more. One on my right, Commissioner Mazza. on my left, Commissioner Jennings, and Mr. Haney in the front row. So I consider myself kind of a veteran here, and I've worked hard for all this, and to be able to sit up here and have a voice is really something. So I'm very honored by all this, and I'm just excited as I'll get out to sit here. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Dennis. Mark, comments? No? Jeff? All right, I've got 4. I'll try to be quick. First, on the live meeting thing, yeah, I agree there are a lot of virtues about doing it in person here. I also think there are some benefits from the Zoom technology, and that really the hybrid option seems like the way to go. We heard from Kelsey at the council meeting before last that it would take them about a month to study what other people are doing in other jurisdictions and figure out a way that would work for us here. So hopefully that's in the future. And I say that in the context of having gotten 2 emails last week, side by side. They came in, one from the county saying COVID rates are increasing, and one from the city saying they're steadily improving. It was kind of a shock to see both of them together. So that to me sort of encapsulates the notion that maybe the hybrid is the way we can go and get the benefits of both worlds. On the tow yard plan, I had some back and forth with Mayor Grisanti and City Manager McClary, and it seems like not everything has been figured out, especially with respect to Eastern Malibu. They do acknowledge that it wasn't fully addressed, and they're hoping that by providing for Western Malibu, they'll somehow make it easier in Eastern Malibu to deal with violations. And they did say that at least now they're going to start collecting data on the tows. And so I hope that's done in a way that all the agencies involved can collect data in a coordinated way, and that they can pool and share that data, and in the end we can get a spreadsheet of a page or 2 long that we can really look at the picture and know what we need going forward by way of a tow yard. And then speaking of lots, lately I've gotten a lot of questions on the Bell lot. And if my understanding is correct, and Richard might jump in on this with his comments, that it's at Coastal now. There's an appeal over the portion at the south end of the lot that is apparently a wetland. It's not quite clear how much of that is or isn't. And the question is, why was the rest of the lot at least not cleaned up like 2 years ago? And what's the holdup? And certainly the whole lot is not going to be wetland, and it seems like there's, in the meantime, a big area of that could be used for an interim tow yard. And then the questions also are, is Edison still paying rent to the owner Bell because the lot is still configured for their use largely, and is the city paying anything, or just what's going on with that lot and why is it sitting the way it is and not getting remediated? And then finally, the Pepperdine Mountain project has been on my radar lately from a couple of people. It's a big arena project that they're planning for kind of the north side of the campus where there's a big parking lot now. It's going to be a vast complex with student center, gyms, workout rooms, event rooms, and an arena that seats 4,000 people for events. So I had a little bit with Richard about this, but I'm still wondering how much say the city has had in the EIR process on that, because it's not in the city, but it's going to affect us a lot. In particular, I'm thinking about traffic and wastewater issues. For each event, if it's 4,000 people, that's several thousand vehicles coming through town. And if they're having a couple of events a week, that might be comparable to increasing the city's traffic by 20% or something. And then on the wastewater, my understanding, and maybe Norm or somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, is they're on a self-contained system there, but they are connected to Tapia when they go over. If they have any excess usage, then they have the pipe that goes up the canyon to Tapia. I see Norm nodding his head. So my wonder is, if they're going to be adding this stadium for 4,000 more people, how much more often are they going to be going over on their usage? And will that affect us downstream in the canyon, either in terms of changing flows out of Tapia or even potentially water quality issues? I don't know. But I just hope we're keeping an eye on that as that indirectly affects Malibu Lagoon. And so with that, those are my comments. Any other rejoinders or rebuttals or anybody? Dennis?
Just the lot out front is what you're talking about, right?
The one down there, yeah. What's going on there?
Councilman Silverstein came in before this commission a few years ago, and is the one that went to Coastal on that about the wetlands. So at the time, Edison was getting ready to do the cleanup. And I was talking to him about maybe doing the trucking and seeing what all that was going on. And then Councilman Silverstein came in and said, you can't have all this. And so this is why that's where that is. So that's actually his lot, and it sits there because that's what he did, and that's why it's sitting there. So whatever changes with council or whatever, I mean with commission, I guess is how that goes.
I see John has a comment.
Yeah, it's a lot more complicated than that. Edison got the property, was getting a TUP to occupy it. Our city manager said he had to wait 32 days. They said, we're out of here, and moved to Oxnard. And then from then on, it went to Coastal. It's still at Coastal, awaiting review by the coastal biologist. The same is true. The gravel was never removed from the Chili Cook-Off property either. Theoretically, they're on contracts to remove it. It was a very complicated situation. It is private property. It is not zoned for a parking lot or a tow yard. So it's complicated. Now on the mountain, that EIR was approved probably 8-9 years ago. The master plan was approved by Coastal 8-9 years ago. They refused to increase John Tyler Road's capacity, so getting out of there is going to be a little funny. The parking is a little under 866 parking spaces for 4,000 plus people. So it's going to be interesting.
Okay. If there are are there other commissioner, anything to add? No? Then I guess we take it to staff, and Richard, I guess you'll have some comment on a few of those things.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. So to jump to your questions, and I have some information for everyone. On the Bell lot, it is an active appeal with the Coastal Commission. I do make contact with them, I would say at least quarterly, to ask for a status on where they are with that. Hopefully that will get to a hearing soon. They seem to be working on a staff report for that one, but the CDP for the remediation of the lot was for the whole lot, and so since it was appealed, they couldn't act on the non-wetland half. It was one application. I don't know, I don't have an answer about the rent. We weren't privy to that. As for Pepperdine, as Commissioner Mazza mentioned, roughly in 2012, 2011-ish, there was an EIR prepared. The city at the time under the previous planning director, Joyce Parker Bozelinski, she did put together a comment letter mentioning things such as traffic, and I want to say also just the burden on utilities, being road and just utility systems. That letter was submitted. I want to say that when it got before the County Board of Supervisors, I think it was a unanimous vote in support of approving it, but the city did submit comments. I want to also mention with regards to the tow yard that we are in the process of processing the temporary use permit. The notice should be going out this week, so there will be a public notice sent out to properties within 500 feet of that parcel. So if anybody is interested, they should be on the lookout for that. In regards to the antenna that is at the Santa Monica City College property, I did reach out to them again last week, to the contact I have there with the construction company, and he re-forwarded my email again to the college district, and it's my understanding that they did file a request for records with the city so that they could understand what conditions were put on them by the Planning Commission. So hopefully we'll be seeing an application from them. As I mentioned, they needed to get a conditional use permit. That was part of their conditions of approval. Also coming up, we have scheduled on May 31st a special hearing to consider the specific plan for the Malibu High School campus. That would come before this Planning Commission for a recommendation and then sent over to the City Council. A little over a month ago, I would say, because I know it's taken us a while because we had to go back and forth a few times with the property owner and their attorneys. But there was a comment brought up about a palm tree on Pacific Coast Highway to the west of the intersection of Latigo and PCH. That tree has been removed. And then also, I want to give a heads up to the Planning Commission because we do receive a lot of calls and we appreciate it about different events occurring in the city to make certain that they comply with the requirements. Just a quick update, the Trancas Market, we've notified them that their events this summer do require a temporary use permit. There was the possibility of I want to say like a 6K run or something like that as part of the farmers market next month. We've also made contact with the event organizers and that's going to be canceled. And also the report was made to the city about vegetation clearance on the backside of the Malibu High campus behind the ball fields. We did make contact with the school district. They explained to us that they have a coastal development permit which allows for it, and we are going through, they gave us a copy of all the CDPs that have been issued for the property. So we are going through that to make certain there were no violations, so that case is still open. But wanted to let you know those are some of the things we hear from the public and what we were following up on. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Richard. It's good to hear some of those things. John?
On the city puts out a weekly report on events, and it comes out Friday around 3 o'clock. And they're all events for the weekend. So is there any way, I get complaints all the time, how do I know this event is legal or has a TUP? Because the public doesn't know about that report in general, and then the ones that do know about it have nobody to talk to because by the time they get it, this office is closed. So is there any way we could have those come out at least a day earlier?
I get my version of it on Thursday afternoon.
Thursday afternoon is the norm. I know that we had some issues maybe twice in the last month where there were issues accessing our database to produce the report and it went out on a Friday morning. I want to say there were at least 2 occurrences that way. But yes, the report is supposed to be published every Thursday. And I also believe that it's on our department website. We can make certain that perhaps it's a bit more noticeable.
Well, if TUPs have to be approved 32 days before they happen, isn't there a way for somebody to know a month ahead of time that there's some big event coming?
Right.
Good evening, Commissioners. So if somebody wants to know or receive a notification of any temporary use permit, they should contact me directly, psalazar@malibucity.org. I will add them to the notification list. If they would like to receive the weekly report, they can go to malibucity.org/news and subscribe to the event permit report there. So there's 2 ways they can find out. Also, as you mentioned, it is also included in the bi-weekly city manager weekly update report.
Okay, but one of the complaints I got was there was an event next door to somebody's house, and it was reasonably large. I don't know if they got a little yellow card or not, but they were very surprised to have a couple hundred people show up. Is there a way to find out without knowing that there's something going to happen, that something might happen next door to you the next day or 2 days later?
I understand your question now. I apologize. At first, I was thinking you're talking about temporary use permits. So temporary use permits require a public notice, and we have been posting on the event report both temporary events that are approved and ones that are pending, so folks get the early notification. However, when it comes to a special event permit, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not a 500-foot mailing or public notice required as part of the code. So I could understand how one might pop up on a neighbor. And unfortunately, I think the best way for someone is to watch our website, correct? Yes, because there's no public notice requirement on those.
Aren't you able to request notices based on a property, if there was a particular property neighboring they could request notices from?
Since the special event permits do not require public noticing, we have not built in that feature. So, and maybe Richard could speak to this, they can submit a special event permit on a Friday for a weekend event if they have all the application materials.
Can you tell us what a special event is?
A special event would be an event that takes place on a residential lot, and there is criteria based on either the number of attendees, whether the event's being hosted by the actual property owner, or if it's a rental. And so the main difference there is special event is private residential property, temporary use permit is for commercial properties.
So is there a limit on special events? Could you have a wedding every weekend?
Yeah, there's a limit about how many you can have in a year period for your special event permits.
And I want to say it's chapter 5, I think, of our municipal code, where it's not in, special events are not, I guess Trevor's going to look it up for us. I think it's chapter 5, or excuse me,
It's
4?
4 events per residential address, and I believe it's 6 for commercial properties.
Correct.
Per year.
And
That's right.
TUPs fall under our zoning ordinance, and special events, I want to say, is chapter 5.
You know, I wonder on the special events if it would make sense to at least establish a pipeline with the heads of various homeowners associations. So while you're not sending out notice to everybody within 500 feet or something, if you could just get the notice to the neighborhood and let them propagate it as they see fit, that might be a helpful intermediary.
Well, there are very few homeowners associations that are real homeowners associations. Most of them expired years and years ago.
Well,
for example, there are none on Point Dune.
Well, I'm just trying to help. Some neighborhoods do have active groups, and those could help.
Craig?
Yeah.
Can I jump in on this?
Yeah.
Are those TUPs physically noticed physically on the site?
Yes, there's property posting, and they also receive the postcard as well.
Okay, well, I think that's probably a pretty good way for the neighbor to know if they see the physical posting on the site.
Yeah, it's required for the special event permit too.
I would suggest for homeowners associations to sign up to receive the weekly report. What we're finding is most special event permits come in maybe a month, or we even have some 6 months early, and they could receive a heads up if something's coming to their neighborhood.
Yeah, and even if there's no formal association, there's bound to be sort of a, neighborhood activist, gadfly, whoever, who, maybe doesn't realize this is something they could be doing, is checking this every week. All right. Other staff comments or commissioner comments? I think with that, we're on to the consent calendar. Item 3, we have none previously discussed. We have several new items. Does anybody have a interest in pulling anything?
I'd like to pull 3B1.
John Mazza would like to pull 3B1.
That's the only one.
There's 3B2 also.
John, do you need a staff report, or is this just a question or two?
Before you pull that one, then we would,
I'll pull 3B2 for questions also. No, I just have questions.
Okay, so quick questions on 3B1 and 3B2. So number 3B1 is a de minimis waiver number 20-011, an application for a new on-site wastewater treatment system for a Woolsey fire-affected parcel at 30060 Andromeda Lane. John, what's?
Okay, the basic question is, this apparently was a rehab that got burned down. It was cliffside. And the applicant, the staff report says, no, now it's going to be a single-family home. But the analysis for the largest tank I've ever seen, 7,540 gallons, says there's going to be 7 bedrooms, 92 fixtures, and 25 employees. So my question is, are we planning a septic system for a rehab or for a house?
Good evening, Chair, Council, I'm sorry. Good evening, Commissioner Mazza. To give you the backstory on this property is when this DMW came to the planning department, it was slated to be a cliffside not cliffside rehab facility. And then until recently, when we noticed this DMW, the applicant came forward and said the owner of the properties on Andromeda did not want to do rehab facilities anymore, so they are selling each property individually to as a single-family home use.
They're doing what? Selling it?
A single-family home use.
Okay, so why should we approve this if it's planned for a rehab? I mean,
it was approved under as a rehab with environmental health. However, I believe the notice already went out for the approval of the DMW, and then we decided just to continue on because we would have to go back to environmental health and they would have to review the project again. So, Richard, do you have anything else?
So we're reviewing it as a rehab, but we're approving it as a house, and that's what I don't understand.
They didn't revise their plans, correct? Yes, so the applicant, this is what you have in front of you is what they proposed to us. The applicant hasn't come back and resubmitted for a smaller system or anything of that nature. If they would have, then we would have got a project revision, something different in front of you guys. But what you have before you this evening is as proposed, and also when it was reviewed, we did take into account the worst case scenario in terms of usage based on what we had in front of us in the historical pattern.
Well, would we, if everybody came in and wanted 25 employees and a 7,500 gallon tank, would we approve them all?
The difference here would be that this was one of the rehabs that was registered with the city. We knew about their operation. I don't want to use the, say, city approved, because we don't issue these types of, we don't issue rehab permits. But this was something we knew about, and as mentioned, as proposed, that's what we have in front of us.
Well, you see we have it in front of us, but the staff report says it's going to be a single-family residence, not a rehab. So one or the other is what's before us. So that's why I'm wondering why. It seems like it came along and they decided, oh no, we're not going to do that, but we just decided not to go through the process of analyzing it as what it is. We just said, oh, we already got the paperwork, so here's your staff report. And to me, that doesn't seem, especially with the problems we've had with rehabs. My real question is, are we in a situation where anybody who might in the future think about renting their house as a rehab, just go ahead and get a 7,500 gallon tank and say they have 25 employees?
So There's also a permitting aspect to this where they have to register through the state. But as I mentioned, the property owner, this is what was proposed. We don't, the department's not in a position to have somebody, or for us to redesign someone's project. This is what was given to us to analyze. And if the owner should choose to sell it as a single-family residence, it's zoned properly, they can do something like that. But as I mentioned, if someone does want to buy this and open up a new rehab, then that would be something they would go through a process with the state. And then also we would look at the city to see if what they're doing violates any of our zoning ordinances.
Okay, well, when we had all the rehab controversy, I was told that the only control we had over rehabs was public health and safety. And it seems like we're de facto just saying, go ahead and build them. So I know I'm not going to get the votes, but I'd like to pull this for a real staff report.
Before you do that, we
use.
should take disclosures and take any public comment.
Oh, okay. I doubt if anybody's going to comment. But
Yeah, any disclosures?
None.
None. Dennis has a word.
I guess since we're gonna ask a question, whether we like rehabs or not, do these people have the right to come back and put back what they had because of the fire? They do, right? I mean, we may not like it, but their place burned down. They're allowed to put it back the way it was?
That is correct, and also under the Fair Housing Act, if there's 6 unrelated individuals living in a home, like a group home type setting, that's protected under the Fair Housing Act as well. It's the only time you can really step in and find that there's a problem and if they don't have permits is if there are medical services being rendered and it's more than 6. But there is a fair housing issue here as well.
Okay, thank you.
So, John, to your concern, it sounds like it's definitely a grandfathering situation.
Well, that's my question. Was it a 7,540 gallon tank prior to the fire?
While Richard's looking at that, can you just confirm, were there any public speakers or requests to speak on this? There are not. Okay.
Philip is bringing up, we're trying to see if we could look for an old approval. They didn't put the existing on the plot plan.
Trevor, in the interest of time, can we jump to the next item and get the answer back on this one, or we need to just sit here and wait?
I would recommend, since this is going to be a long period of time to pull this up,
If it's something we have an on base, we'll have it for you in a few moments.
Okay.
It depends on the age, though, unfortunately. If the record was prior to going everything digital, it may not be there.
Is it ever the case that there's a rehab with 25 employees that's actually functioning on a 3,600 gallon tank?
Well, I think there were many, many of them.
On the small tank?
We don't know how many rehabs we have, but we've had, when it first started, we had many, many.
Also the issue about the regulation of the septic system, we can't stop a rehab from coming in by forcing them to have a small system. The issue is if it creates a hazard, then they have to come to us and request a bigger system, which is, what's being done here, to request a system appropriate for what they are, so it's not pumped constantly.
Well, that's my question. They are not requesting a system for what they're using it for. It says right in the staff report that it's not going to be a rehab.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not requesting a rehab system. So I'm just wondering, we have been told 78 rehabs in Malibu. We lost a third of our population to things like rehabs. So I just want to make sure that we're considering what we're doing. And I've never seen a staff report that analyzes something one way and then reports it as being used another way.
So,
I hate to waste people's time, but this is the kind of thing that when you have all these state laws forcing uses on you, that you need to follow closely.
Speaking to John's point, is there any sense that the rehab use has lost its entitlement for lack of having been used that? I mean, is the slate wiped clean now since they have said we're not going to be doing it as a rehab? Because if there's a grandfathering component and we want to allow the possibility of the rehab to continue, then yeah, it needs the big tank. But if that is no longer on the table, then it seems like we would be giving them something that they don't need.
Craig?
Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah, the part of this that troubles me is that it's not the first time that we've basically tried to regulate the use of a property by backing into it by questioning whether the septic system is of the right size or not. And I guess my question would be whether there's any legal basis for saying that we can't, that we can stop a septic system from going in, a septic system that otherwise complies, because we're worried about what might be done with that system in the future.
Yeah.
So this system's twice the size of the tank size is twice the size. I'm not a wastewater engineer, so I couldn't opine on effectiveness of it. But the previous system that was approved by the city in 2003 was a 3,000-gallon system.
So they were operating 25 employees and various other, and then tenants on a 3,000-gallon tank. And now we're authorizing a single-family residence on twice the size. Is that right?
That is what you have before you this evening.
Okay.
And then as far as a grandfathering of the use, as I mentioned, there is a fair housing issue.
Well, we're not grandfathering if we're
No, you're not.
What it was.
There isn't a grandfathering
There is,
issue.
what I'm trying to say is, there isn't one. And the proposal in front of you, as we mentioned, the structure was used as a rehab. The applicant, the facts are that the applicant submitted it as that way and apparently has changed his mind later on in the process. But if the system is approved, essentially the issue we have here is just there's too much capacity, I guess you could say. They would just, less likely to have this house have a problem with effluence.
So that's our choice to make.
It sounds to me that if the existing house had a 3,000 tank and typical now would be a 3,600, why wouldn't that just be the upgrade now if the rehab is off the table?
The code works in the opposite. The code looks to limit you from having something undersized. We have limits on how small a system can be, but we have no limits on how large a system can be. If somebody wishes to put in an extremely large system, there is nothing that prohibits them from doing that in our codes.
Yeah, and when Richard looked at this, he's looking at the three findings in 13.411B, which are that the OWTS or driveway, well, the OWTS in this case, improvements have no potential adverse effects, either individually or cumulatively, on coastal resources, that the OWTS improvements are consistent with the Malibu Local Coastal Program, including the Resource Protection Plan policies as applicable, and 3, if an OWTS is to be relocated, is it being relocated here? Okay, then this applies, that the director in consultation with Environmental Health Administrator has determined the relocation is necessary to better protect coastal resources. So those are the findings that are what Richard has made and what you guys are reviewing here tonight or determining it full CDP is required.
I have a question, if I might.
Yeah.
Richard, do you know if the state has any requirement, when they issue a permit for a rehab facility, do they get into the wastewater treatment system in terms of, qualifying size-wise or anything like that?
When they issue a permit, they usually do reach out to the city. The county does this too with business licensing to look if there's any violations or a zoning code violation, I guess would be the best way to put it, so wastewater included. If there's any violations or issues with the property, they would ask us. I don't believe they would look into it. I don't think they have a wastewater engineer that would look into it. They would rely on an answer from us.
So if somebody wants to obtain a permit for a rehab, it theoretically doesn't matter to the state whether it's a 3,000 gallon tank, if they're going to have 6 unrelated people, 25 employees and whatever, whether it's a 3,000 gallon tank or a 7,500 gallon tank. So to me, I would think logically, wouldn't we be better off if they had a larger system, if there's nothing in our code that says that we are, limit the size on the upside, and if it does in fact become a rehab facility in the future, at least there's no issue with, the size of the tank not being able to handle the flow.
You are correct, and another thing that comes into play with this could be an issue too of the ground not percolating fast enough, so the tank needs to be a larger size to give you that extra time so you're not flooding the ground with wastewater. So the larger the system, essentially, if you want to say they're underusing it or a larger capacity, it just equals less likely to run into issues in the future.
Okay, Dennis.
I'm thinking first of all, we're talking way too much about septic tanks again, but I'm thinking that if the state is looking at this, most of the world is not most of the world, but most of our state is on a sewer. So I doubt that they're thinking about a septic tank for these things. They're just approving it or doing what the normal process would be, and they don't know that we're on septic tanks. So I'm sure that's all of that.
Yeah, that's correct. It's our jurisdiction on health and safety.
Okay, I feel like we've kind of run this around to a point. John, do you have a motion on this?
Yeah, my motion is to pull it for a full CDP if I get a second.
Do I see or hear a second? I don't think you have a second, John.
Okay, so I would like to go on to 3B. Well, we have to do the consent then, I guess.
So then we have
Yeah,
to.
so then, Chair Hill, if you just want to receive and file it without objection.
So that would be a receive and file on that item then, and then that takes us on to 3B2, is it?
Yes,
Um,
and that's for questions also.
This is Administrative Coastal Development Permit Amendment, Woolsey Fire, number 22-001, an application for the construction of a new swimming pool and spa, additional decking, landscaping, and other related exterior development for a parcel damaged in the Woolsey fire at 5814 Phillip Avenue. John, since you pulled this, what's your concern here? Do you need a staff report?
First, and I can't find it right now, but in here, the resolution says that the front fence is supposed to be 10% non-permeable, which is a strange resolution item. Does that mean that part of the fence is, I've never seen one like that. Does that mean part of the fence is 6 feet high that's non-permeable? And we're deviating from what we normally say, you can't be over 42 inches? Or is there something else going on here? I had it marked as page 2, 22. Oh, that's maybe the resolution. But that was one question. The other question is, the lot was 142.67 feet wide, supposed to have side yard setbacks of 25%, which equals 35.67 feet, and the actual is 34.42. On the compliance table, it says it complies, but it's short. And that's what I was wondering how that, it says 34.42 on the compliance table too. So that doesn't seem to jive with the math.
Are you guys following his question there?
Yes, so to answer the setback questions, the proposed scope of work is for a swimming pool, so, and a deck. We are not talking about the already approved ADU in addition to the house. So what I provided is the required setbacks for a swimming pool, which is 5 feet from the property line. So that's why I put the conformance review table says it complies since the pool is located nowhere near 5 feet from the property line.
But this is the side yard setback.
Correct.
For the house or for the pool?
It's for the swimming pool. If you look at the top of table 2, it says zoning conformance, and in parentheses it says swimming pool.
Okay, so the 25% cumulative is what's incorrect on that table.
No, for swimming pools, it's 5 feet all around. Doesn't matter if it's a cumulative or a minimum.
Yeah, so your table says side yard setback, 25% cumulative. The cumulative doesn't matter because it's a swimming pool.
Correct.
Okay, so that's what's wrong with that table. And this has already had, you said an ADU? We don't have ADUs. It already had another unit placed on it?
Correct. The commission approved it in November of 2021. So this amendment is only for new landscaping, a pool and a deck. Okay,
and now the last question, the trellis has lights all over it. Now those are outside lights. Mm-hmm. Are they don't appear to be required to be on a timer, or on a motion sensor. Is that required?
It is part of the dark sky ordinance, and it is in the conditions that all lights require to be compliant with the dark sky ordinance.
Right, and my question is, these are mounted trellis lights. Does that require motion sensors and a timer versus just quote outside lights? These are actually built in. And does it have that? That's my question. Because there's a lot of them. And the drawings seem to appear to be permanent downlights. So I don't know, maybe Richard, you can read the resolution and see if it mentions that, but they don't appear to be on the drawings anything other than outside lights. And they're not attached to the building. And they're over 42 inches high.
While I'm working on that one, I'll explain the 10%. The code says that fences in the front yard have to be visually permeable. And the definition of visually permeable is that open, permeable, non-view obscuring fencing means fencing constructed of a material, transparent, such as glass or plastic panels or wrought iron or any other solid material, which is 90% open to light and air. What the report has is 10% solid, basically the inverse. But it achieves the same thing. You can either say that...
That's the whole fence, though, not just one part of it. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yes, the front yard fencing and the gate, that's everything located in the front yard, is not to exceed more than 10% solid, which is 90% visually open, which...
I know, but there's two ways to say that. 10% of it's blocked and 90% of it's open, or the way we usually have our fence requirements, it can't be over 42 inches high, blocked. And that's why I wondered why we used that different resolution. I've never seen it before. So I was wondering if there's a part of this fence that is 10% up to 6 feet high, blocked, and the rest of it is not blocked. It's semantics, I know, but it's something that's I've never seen before. Why don't we use and the real question is, why don't we use our normal, has to follow code number so-and-so and so-and-so and be no more than 42 inches high?
This falls into the category of items we should be asking about in the preceding days.
Well,
Let me also point out while you're looking for that, there is, condition 20 does provide that the lighting be directed downward and inward, so there's no off-site glare.
yeah, but that's not off.
And then I was going to say, condition 19, though, is a little problematic in that it says the illumination level should not be greater than 1 foot candle. But in the draft that we have on the DSO, the separate item, the residence to residence level is 0.1 foot candle,
Correct,
not 1 foot candle.
right.
So I just noticed that just now.
I know I'm nitpicking here, but these things tend to get Xeroxed into the next resolution, the next resolution. And when you see a resolution change from hundreds before that, you have to ask.
Chair Hill, while we're waiting for that, if we could take disclosures and then see if there are any public speakers, we could open the public hearing.
Any disclosures on this?
None.
We looked at it in November. I guess that's already been stated, yeah. So no disclosures. Are there any public speakers on this, including the applicant? Do they have, are they here even?
There are no public speakers, and the applicant team said that will be present at the meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Richard?
So to circle back on the two things, whether you say 90% or 10%, it's the same fencing. There is no loophole there. There are no semantics. The way the code reads is that you're allowed to have solid fencing below 42 inches. Once you get above 42 inches, it has to be 90% open. And with that, 10%, that's 10% closed is the inverse to get you to 100%. So and looking at their fencing plan, they're basically, it looks like it's the gate's going to be slatted so you could see through it. But the portion, what we're looking for is that the portion, as the code reads, above 42 inches is at least 90% open to light and air. And then with the question about motion detectors, looking at our lighting ordinance, when we look at motion detectors, that's for lighting that's either security lighting, and then also lighting that's going to be used beyond, unless I'm missing it here, lighting that's going to stay on beyond 11 p.m. So if these folks don't have a motion detector on it, then the thought process there is that per the code, they would be turning that light off. The condition that's contained in your resolution there pertaining to the dark skies lighting, that is our standard language that we use. There's nothing in there that's going to let somebody skate the dark skies ordinance. We can definitely look at putting in an inclusion that if the lighting is either security lights or lights that are intended to be on past 11 p.m. as I'm reading here, we could look at putting something in there, but I think the goal is we want lights off at 11.
Well, yeah, couldn't anybody say, gee, I intend to turn them off at 11, so I don't need a motion detector on any lights? That seems like a pretty broad excuse. I'm the motion detector.
Don't disagree with you. However, I think Trevor perhaps could opine on this. I think it would be an issue here of, I think we're adding to the code because of the way it's written. That doesn't have the requirement for a motion sensor.
This is the patio.
The way it's written is all lighting shall be extinguished by 11 p.m. or when people are no longer present in exterior areas, whichever is the later, except for lighting activated by a motion sensor. And then it goes on to talk more about entrance lighting and parking areas and not patios.
So the motion sensor is only required if it's different, if it's going beyond the 11 o'clock deadline, right?
What? It was never voluntary to have a motion sensor. You're saying, gee, if they have a motion sensor, then they have one. Well, what happens if they don't?
Then they don't have lights after 11 p.m.
No,
if
they're
not in the
required to
area.
have a motion sensor to have outside lights.
It's security lighting is identified and building entrance lighting, the types of lighting that if you were to come home to a dark home or a driveway, those types of lighting, it does identify as being required. But it doesn't, because it goes on to say security lighting shall be controlled by motion detectors. But it does not say that patio lighting, it starts off with talking about outdoor decorative lighting, talking about in areas, and then it then goes to except for lighting activated by a motion detector, and it's talking about building entrances, parking areas, and driveways.
So this type of lighting does not require a motion detector. That's why you did not make it a condition here. So the question then for the commission is whether to make it a full CDP or unless Richard's seeing some issue that needs to be corrected and he wants to withdraw it to redo it, then the question is just whether to make it a full CDP here from the commission.
Well, I understand what you're saying. I'd have to reread the dark sky ordinance. I remember distinctly all the discussion on string lights and how we have to have string lights, and if you're gonna have lights outside in your patio, you have to have motion sensors and blah, blah, blah. I'm not gonna reread the whole thing right now and waste the time in the meeting, but
Yeah, John,
it's there somewhere.
I don't think the motion detector is connected to the entertainment lighting, which is what they're talking about.
Every time we have a roof deck or anything, we have that in there as our provision. But if you guys, I'll read it over the next 2 weeks and bring it back.
But back to my question about the amendments of the DSO we're looking at tonight talk about from residence to residence a threshold of 0.1 foot candle, and this resolution is allowing 1 foot candle. Is that something we should be sort of proactively looking forward to what we will presumably pass tonight, or should we make this conditional upon just whatever the DSO eventually says?
The more strict will apply. So if you change the dark skies ordinance to make it more strict, then that will apply even if there's a condition here that's.
It will override whatever's in the, okay.
They do have to comply with the dark skies ordinance.
So we don't need to worry about that. All right. Okay, it sounds like we're moving on then to item 5A.
Sorry, was that receive and file? Was no objection?
Receive and file, yeah, thank you. 5A is continued to a date uncertain. We're on to 5B. This is Howdy's Sonrisa Cafe at 23401 Civic Center Way, Unit 3A. This is for a conditional use permit number 21-009, an application to allow the on-site sale and consumption of wine, beer, liquor, and spirits, ABC license type 47, to patrons of a bona fide eating place, Howdy's Cafe. Let's see, so staff report, please. Hi, Jessica.
Hello. Nice to see everyone in person this evening. Waiting for it? Okay, there we go. Good evening, Chair Hill and members of the Planning Commission. The item you have before you tonight is for conditional use permit number 21009 for an existing restaurant located at 23401 Civic Center Way. Here's the project site outlined in red. The project site is located within the Civic Center District and is zoned commercial visitor serving. Here is an overall aerial shot of the project site, which is located within the existing Howdy's Restaurant, which occupies the southernmost tenant space of Building 3. You can see a little red balloon hovering over it there. Here are some site photographs showing the existing restaurant. The existing restaurant was approved under a planning clearance in May of 2019, and subsequently the restaurant was approved to expand into the adjacent tenant space in May of 2021. The restaurant occupies Unit 3A. The new conditional use permit is to allow for the on-site consumption of wine, beer, and liquor for an ABC Type 47 license to Howdy's, an existing restaurant within the Whole Foods Shopping Center. The hours of operation will be 9 a.m. to 10 p.m., and the total service area, including the outdoor patio area, totals 992 square feet. Per condition number 14 within the City Council Resolution 1543, amplified music is prohibited on the project site unless authorized by a TUP. Here again is a site plan highlighting the location of Howdy's Restaurant as indicated by the yellow star. Here's the floor plan, which includes the existing restaurant and outdoor dining space. The indoor service area totals 221 square feet, while the exterior patio, which is existing, totals 771 square feet. The shopping center specific plan allows for a total of 4,000 square feet of service area and is compliant with that total. It additionally allows a total of 4,800 square feet of outdoor service area and is compliant with that as well. Staff recommends, based on the analysis of the proposal and the findings within the conditional use permit, to adopt resolution number 2237, approving CUP 21009. This concludes my presentation. Myself and the applicant team are available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Can we have disclosures before we move on here, Mark?
No, nothing to disclose.
Jeff?
None.
Dennis?
None.
John?
I've eaten at Howdy's. I've eaten at Howdy's and given them 5 stars.
I went by this site, looked at the space, and that's it. So now we have a applicants team or public speakers have a presentation. Welcome.
Hey, good evening. My name is Steve Rawlings, and I am a consultant working with Howdy Caberons and Ian Roven, who are both here in the audience and obviously available for any questions. We didn't have any formal presentation prepared this evening. I hope that everybody's had an opportunity to eat at Howdy's. It's great food, and he certainly seems to have a very, very loyal customer base. The request for you this evening is just to simply be allowed to be able to sell the distilled spirits along with the beer and wine that we're currently serving. It certainly seems to be in demand. We have customers daily asking for a regular margarita as opposed to a wine margarita, and Howdy would certainly like to provide that. So, and I don't see that this would be any type of public nuisance or public safety issue. He certainly has been operating there technically, I think, since 1987 when it was La Salsa. Well, that's when he first started working here in Malibu, I should say. So with that, we appreciate your support. We do agree to all of the conditions of approval as presented to you this evening, and myself and Howdy and Ian are all available for any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you. Okay, I have a question for Trevor, and I guess for everybody here, just sort of a threshold question. We're scheduled to hear on June 6th an application to sell alcohol from another shop in the same shopping center. Is there any impetus that we should be considering these together in the same breath somehow?
I wouldn't say so. You know, each of these has a separate CUP for a separate restaurant. This is not like a shopping center coming in piecemeal. This is already, a specific plan's been approved for the entire development, and then these are just processed you know, in turn in terms of when their applications are complete and processed. So I wouldn't think there's any need to hold off to hear them both together.
So theoretically, we could approve this tonight, and then a month from now, we could say, to cure, we could say, you know what, we think there's too much alcohol here already.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at each conditional use permit, you know, separately. So that's the analysis that comes through.
Okay, all right. Comments, questions?
Are we gonna have any,
Oh, are there any public speakers on this? Okay.
You
Thanks,
wanna close
Rebecca.
it?
What?
You gotta close it.
Got to close the public hearing. Okay, the public hearing is closed, apart from if we have questions, we'll ask you. All right, John.
Okay, I've got a couple questions. On page 6 of 12, you say that, and I looked it up, the CUP says 4,000 square feet of restaurant are allowed in the center and 4,800 square feet of outdoor seating. Currently, 3,666 square feet of center is for food service area and 4,800 square feet is used for outdoor seating, which only gives you 346 square feet left for another additional restaurant. So is that correct? I tried to find out, go through all the old CUPs and see what they all added up to. Is Blue Bottle included in this as an outside seating area?
I believe so. Let me pull up the plan, one moment.
And then the coconut or whatever it's called?
I do know
There's
that
no breakdown on, and so we can use these numbers in the hearing on June 6th and say, you got 366 square feet or.
there is a total break.
34 square feet. That's it for your restaurant?
There is a breakdown on, let me see which page. On page 23 of 40 of the staff report. It's an attachment behind the proposed project plans
Oh, okay.
that provides, and the highlighted yellow areas shows the outdoor seating area. And then on the bottom right-hand side, I believe that shows the total restaurant indoor food service area. So the total is 3,726. So that would be correct. Should there be any remaining or any additional restaurants, they would only be allowed to go up to that 4,000 square feet for the center.
Okay, and then this is the one that's colored, right, with blue?
Yes, that's correct.
I don't see any yellow for outdoor seating area. Is it all just, you're counting the two together?
It's actually highlighted in yellow under, so the red writing says, like, for instance, the real coconut.
Okay, it's just in writing.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yes,
And-
it's highlighted there.
So does Blue Bottle, is that highlighted or not? I mean, I need my
Yes,
microscope.
the outdoor seating outside of Blue Bottle is 525 square feet.
Okay, great. Now, my only other question is, and this is a question for Richard. We have a requirement here that you're gonna inspect it in a year, and in 5 years, you're gonna inspect it again and come back to us with a report. Now, we've done this maybe 10 times, and I can't remember of an inspection ever coming back. How do you do this? How do you know 5 years from today that you're supposed to go look at that restaurant and say, gee, are they selling 50% food and 50% booze? Or a year from now? And what reporting does the restaurant give you to show you what percent booze and food you're doing? Because that's what this requires. And I hate to require things that never happen.
Sorry, I'm just bringing up the condition because I want to get the exact.
It's sort of like the Beau Rivage never ever came back.
This is part of our goal with the code enforcement staff. That's one of the reasons why we're growing it, is for condition compliance. The way we'd like to do this is to track it in our database. I know in the past, we've put the requirement in here, we've put the onus on the actual operator of the restaurant by saying that the restaurant operator shall contact staff for site inspection and compliance review, and also pay do we put that in this one? And pay the applicable inspection fees to the city for the inspection. But this is something that we're looking at because, yes, compliance monitoring is kind of a new thing for the city because of the need for it. We have a number of conditional use permits that have such a condition, and there's other conditions too, just in general, about view corridors and things like that, and so we are working on that.
Okay, so you're coming up with a computer system. Now, I didn't see a mention of a fee for inspection in here. Is there one?
There is not.
Shouldn't there be?
There should be. We should probably put in here a sentence that say, the applicant shall request, or the operator shall request an inspection and pay the applicable fee.
Well, do we want to have them request? If they don't request, does that mean you can't show up?
It's not that we can't show up, it's just a tool for us to say, hey, you were supposed to notify us in 5 years, we need to do this inspection. And then also we have the ability to charge the applicable fee because it's been memorialized.
Is that adopted in our fee schedule?
We have a site inspection fee, yes. That's why we use the word applicable, because it changes as approved by the budget.
Okay, so you'd want to add that to condition 27.
Yes.
So it would add a second sentence that would just say, the operator shall request such inspections and pay any applicable fee required.
That's correct.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I move that we accept staff's recommendation on 5B with the addition of the language Trevor just read for condition number 27.
I second that.
Okay, we have a second for discussion. Anybody done at this end? Comments, questions?
I guess just a point of clarification, that patio section at Howdy's is the entirety of the seating. Is that right? The outdoor section? So that, there's a sign there that says that it's available to anybody, not just your patrons, right? Okay, but since you're a restaurant, you're serving food as well as alcohol, and you have to have a 50-50 split, then that takes off the table any problem with minors being in the area. Do I understand that right? I guess I'll ask that to Richard.
Richard, did you hear that?
If I understand Commissioner Wetton correctly, the concern was about minors in the area where the food service is taking place.
But it's not I'm just trying to clarify, it's not an issue because it's considered a restaurant because it's at least 50% of the sales are from food.
That's correct, and my understanding too is that's part of their liquor license, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. That's the type of liquor license they're applying for because they're a bona fide eating place. So it's a type 47 license. They have to have a certain amount of sales that have to be in conjunction with food.
And that license doesn't prohibit minors from being at the restaurant.
Correct.
Right, but as I remember, like we did on the coconut, I think it's called the coconut, you have to have a barrier, which this one does. You can't just have an open patio.
Yes, and additionally, there's signage. It says no alcohol beyond this point in the patio, and that will be placed on several locations on the outdoor patio. So they can't exit with open container around the center.
Yeah, the barrier is to serve the purpose of keeping the beverages on site and not necessarily keeping minors out because it's not supposed to function as a bar. You're supposed to, the premise here is you're buying food and then the side to it is the alcohol.
Now, Mark mentioned that it was the patio, but it also includes the 137 square feet called Malibu Sushi, and that's enclosed. That's in the building, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So it's in the adjacent tenant. There's going to be one tenant space, and then the other side, there'll be a sushi bar for people to eat as well.
I have a sort of planning 101 question that you could clarify. When I looked at the patio, to me it looks enclosed on approximately 3.5 sides. and with some air gaps around, almost like clear stories above. I looked at the LIP definition of an enclosed building. Building enclosed, a structure which is not open to the air for more than 40% of its surface. This to me looks like it's enclosed, like, I don't know, 80% of its surface. So I guess my question is why, how is this an exterior space? It's got a permanent roof, it's got walls 3.5 around, and presumably the windows could be closed.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm just, it's a question about what is the boundary between enclosed and unenclosed?
No, you are correct. I haven't, I'd have to go back and look because what was approved, because I know this question came up. The glass that's there is supposed to function as a windbreak. It was not approved to create an enclosed space. It was. I want to say there was a concern with the portion that would be next to the La Paz development. I'm looking at that for the applicant to shake their heads. I'm talking correctly here, not making this up. There was a concern there, I think, that the wall, there had to be a barrier of so many feet because there's a drop off on the other side. I think there might even be one on the portion of the patio that faces Civic Center. Because I want to say that you enter at like, parking lot level, and the patio is flat, but the ground slopes away at an angle. So the La Paz end of it, there needed to be a barrier to prevent folks from going over the side or trying to exit that way. But the glass that was approved was done so that it would be consistent with the section that you mentioned, because you're looking at the correct section, which is essentially to create it's supposed to be a unenclosed area, because since this is commercial development, if it's unenclosed, that does not count towards FAR, and it would make it as a outdoor patio. But that is something that we can look into and report back to you, but that is not supposed to be an enclosed space.
I mean, it sounds like you're saying it's an unenclosed space that you, for whatever reasons, safety, et cetera, have enclosed a little bit further. And so I don't know, I'm a little fuzzy on that one. Let me think about that.
What I'm saying
Richard,
is
I
that
for one would like to see you come back on that because that never got a CDP. That was approved somewhere in City Hall. And those windows are at least 10 feet tall.
So what I'm saying is that the space was not to be considered enclosed. It's supposed to maintain the unenclosed, be consistent with the definition of unenclosed.
But was it? That's the question. You said it's more like 80% instead of 40%.
I didn't use a percentage.
I did.
What I was saying is that I can look at it again and report back. But it was when that question was brought up to the previous director, it was for the purposes of safety and a windbreak, and it was to be a unenclosed area. So it's not, those walls shouldn't have created an enclosed space.
Even with the safety and the windbreak, it still needs to meet the definition of unenclosed.
So will you bring that back to us? An answer?
If the commission would like us to and provide that direction, we'd be glad to.
Well, we have a motion on the table for discussion.
Yeah. I think, Richard, you can just bring a report back about that. Can you look into it and just bring a report back?
Yes, if that's what the commission would like, we'd be glad to do that.
How do we do that? A consensus?
Yeah, is there a consensus here to have a report from Richard? I mean,
I would certainly like to, since we have several buildings that are little cashmere company and stuff that don't appear to be code compliant. This is easily fixable, of course, because it's just glass, but that's why I'd like to know.
I think I would like that too, but I don't know that we necessarily have three.
That's not a part of this motion though, right?
it's not part of the motion. This is separate. This is, I mean,
Yeah, that's
we can vote on the motion. This is just getting direction to Richard to bring a report back about whether the space is enclosed, properly treated as unenclosed or not.
And if he decided it wasn't, then it would just be remediated somehow.
Yeah, he would just bring it back into compliance.
The only other choice
it would be a code enforcement issue.
Okay.
The motion's still on the table, right?
Okay.
Right,
correct.
right, we're
Yeah.
just doing a consensus.
The motion was staff's recommendation with the change to condition
See,
27.
once we do the motion, we're sort of done with it, so do you have consensus? Do we have consensus?
I'd like to see that report.
Because
but-
otherwise, the only other thing to do would be a CDP complaint.
Even if there isn't consensus, you can follow up with Richard about it.
Yeah,
Well,
It'd be a
or
good-
you could file a
report it to
complaint.
Doug as well.
Yeah,
or John, we can just hound him at every meeting.
no, just
Until he does
go
it.
to Doug. I think it's a lot simpler for Richard to tell us.
I have just some questions about the alcohol, and I'm not really clear what scope or what requirements we have to meet. It seems like we've got at least half a dozen restaurants within about a 1,000-foot radius that are doing full alcohol service already. I could list them off, and then we're expecting, I'm not sure, maybe a couple more at La Paz or whatever the new name of that is. So I'm just wondering what criteria, I know it's not like liquor stores where we have, one per 2,500 residents. That we don't have that kind of spec for, so is there any sort of formal consideration that we should be taking into account?
It's part of the conditional use permit as you're making the findings on this discussion. What we do, and I think it's attached if I'm not mistaken, is we do reach out to the sheriff's department for their input. Anytime we receive a conditional use permit that includes liquor, we do route it. Sorry, I'm trying to thumb through here to find it.
You're looking for the sheriff's letter in the packet?
Yes.
It should be included in your packet as attachment number 4.
Yeah.
And so they didn't write anything here, but what we look for, we do look to see if they've had, we asked the sheriff if they've had issues or calls related to alcohol problems, things that we want to ask them, do you think this is going to cause a problem in the area? And as you can see, they didn't fill out much here. They name and they just said approved. They didn't provide any explanation. But we do ask that question, and you are correct, Chair. The general plan, it doesn't provide us the specific guidance like it does on a liquor store when it comes to a restaurant.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Are there other questions? If not, I think we have a vote.
Well,
Take a vote.
did we get a consensus or not? Can we ask for a
We're
vote
good.
for a consensus?
On this little sub point?
Yes,
So the straw
because
poll
once
thing?
you've done the vote on the motion, the hearing's over on that.
So,
It's not tied to the motion.
so to be clear, this would be seeking clarification for this, both this case and in general, what constitutes exactly an enclosed space, and how is that interpreted?
Yeah, as long as it's not part of this motion.
It would be brought back to us afterwards.
It's not part of the
separate
motion.
from
This
the
is separately to put
Okay.
an item on the future agenda for a report from Richard about whether this area is properly treated as unenclosed or if
Right, because I believe I could follow up with commissioners, correct me if I'm wrong, outside of the meeting to answer questions like this, but if they would like me to bring it back in a public forum, I do need consensus for, correct,
Okay, so
Trevor?
let's
Yeah.
vote.
My preference would be to have Richard address it with the individual commissioners who have concern.
Okay, well, let's vote and see if we have a consensus, because I would consider this a compliance issue. If we don't get an answer from Richard, we'll let the compliance department decide. Code enforcement.
So we're taking a vote
What-
to
what-
approve the establishment with alcohol, yet we're going to have a consensus on that right now?
Chair,
No, we're voting to approve this as it is. We're also voting, we're asking by consensus to have Richard come back and tell us about the enclosed area. It has nothing to do with this
And
permit.
the only way it would affect this is after the fact, if he said, oh, yeah, you know what, we calculated something wrong, and they have to change something about how the windows are configured, or some minor modification.
That has nothing to do with 5C.
Yeah.
Chair Hill, if I may recommend, if we could vote on the motion on the project here, and then after that, before you call the next item, we could ask for a motion to put an item on the future agenda to have Richard report back about the unenclosed or enclosed nature of the patio. It doesn't need to be part of this hearing. It's actually sort of muddying the record about
Right.
this motion. So if we could take that vote, and
Right,
then after
John,
that.
the sequence is not relevant.
Because this request is just to put an item on a future agenda. It's not tied to the approval of the CUP here.
Got it. Okay, let's call the roll on the main motion, please.
And that is the motion, staff's recommendation for approval with the addition to condition 27 to include the language, the operator shall request such inspections and pay any applicable fees required. Is that correct?
Yes.
Commissioner Mazza?
Yes.
And the second?
Yes.
Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Mazza,
Yes.
Vice Chair Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings,
Yes.
Commissioner Wetton,
Yes.
Chair Hill.
Yes. All right,
Motion
and then
carries.
on the separate question of, as a general matter, can we get clarity on the enclosed versus unenclosed with this as sort of the case example?
Since this is not a consensus, I suggest, Commissioner Mazza, if you want to make a motion to put an item on a future agenda. to
I'll
have-
make a motion to put an item on a future agenda for the planning director to come back and analyze what constitutes a closed space. Is that what we should?
To report back about whether the space at Howdy's is properly treated as an unenclosed space.
Correct. That's my motion.
I'll second it. Discussion, no? Roll call, please?
In my own feeling is that Richard's got a certain amount to do. And this is an item which has really not general applicability. And so I think if you're questioning, if you want to discuss with Richard, like any of us do, if we want to talk to Richard about a fine point of how interpretation is done, you go talk to Richard about it. But, it's now 8 o'clock. We've gotten through one item after the consent calendar. And I think the more efficient way to do it is just go talk to Richard. So, no, I don't support it.
Well, we used to, and it'll come up in the next item, we would set standards for the way things are treated. And we have a planning, what do they call it? Interpretation manual, which hasn't been touched in years. And this is what we're after. So we treat everybody the same. And Craig brought up a apparent discrepancy in our requirements, our codes, and we need an explanation of that in public. Otherwise, as far as I'm concerned, it has to be done by a compliance review, which is quite extensive and appealable. And so we're not talking about having Richard spend a couple hours reading some paragraphs and going out and taking a look. We're talking about many, many hours of compliance. And I think it's much more efficient just to find out what the real story is. Now, we can read it, you can have your own opinions of it, but if the public doesn't know, and it'll become apparent in the next item, if the builders don't know what the rules are, then things don't work right. I'll put it that way.
All right, let's have the vote now. And there's, as Jeff says, there are other options. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Mazza,
Yes.
Chair Hill,
Yes.
Vice Chair Smith,
Absolutely not. No.
Commissioner Jennings,
No.
Commissioner Wetton.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. As regards the timing of that, it might, as John suggested, might well work in the context of a bigger review of planning policies. All right, so that takes us on to one of the two items we have left for the evening, and it's only 8 o'clock. This will be 5 C, at 28867 Gray Fox Street.
Chair Hill, just want to confirm on the last one, is it okay if Richard just provides that report as part of his planning director's report at the beginning of the meeting? You don't need a whole item for that, correct?
Don't need a whole what? I'm sorry?
You didn't want an agenda. Can you just make that report as part of his planning director's report?
I placed it on a future agenda.
You want a full agenda item? Okay.
Yeah. I think whatever work is involved is substantially the same, whatever that means. Oh, thank you. All right, so as I was saying, we're on 5C, 28867 Gray Fox Street within the appealable coastal zone. This is for coastal development permit number 19-042, site plan review number 19-056, minor modification number 19-009, demolition permit number 21-013, and code violation number 28-126, an application for a remodel of and addition to an existing single-family residence, a new detached garage, second unit, and associated development. May we have a staff report, please? Tyler, welcome.
Yes, hi, Chair Hill, members of the Planning Commission. Very good to see you all again. Next item tonight is for a proposed CDP, as Commissioner Hill mentioned, for an extensive remodel and addition, as well as the construction of a detached garage, second unit, and associated development. A code violation was placed on the property on January 16, 2019, after it was discovered that a remodel was started without proper permits. A project to amend or to resolve that code enforcement was submitted on June 25th, 2019, and the application included additional items other than just the code enforcement. The project is located in the Point Dume neighborhood and is within the appeal zone of the California Coastal Commission. It's east of Fernhill Road and south of Wildlife Road. It hosts environmentally sensitive habitat area at the northeastern end of the property where steeper than 4-to-1 slopes lead down to an LCP map stream. The project proposes the following. It's an interior-exterior remodel of the existing residence. 46.5% of exterior walls are proposed to be demolished. A 431 square foot addition to the single-family residence. A change from a pitch roof to a flat roof. A detached 900 square foot second unit, a detached 943 square foot detached garage, a new swimming pool and spa, permeable pool decking, landscape, hardscape, a new on-site wastewater treatment system, a 570 square foot open air parking trellis, a 220 square foot open air patio trellis, and a a new front yard fence with 42-inch solid up to 6 feet view permeable and some vehicular gates. The project includes a site plan review for construction over 18 feet up to 24 feet with a flat roof, and a minor modification for up to a 50% reduction of the front yard setback. So here you see a site plan showing all of the proposed development. The pool is sited in between the new detached garage and second unit. The existing attached garage will become habitable area, part of the existing single-family residence. The proposed development is to be all on slopes flatter than 4-to-1, as required by Chapter 4 of the LIP regarding ESHA in the Point Dume neighborhood. The project is proposing to reduce the front yard setback by 50%, and staff was able to make all the required findings. Multiple properties along Gray Fox have similar structures sited in the same relative areas on their respective lots. Here's a floor plan of the single-family home's upper level. The darker gray areas highlight where the proposed additions will be. This here is a floor plan of the lower level. A small addition is proposed on the back end here as well. Here's an elevation showing the 18 and 24 foot line above the lowest adjacent grades. As mentioned, the project proposes a site plan review for development over 18 feet, up to 24 feet with a flat roof. The site will be compliant with the 2/3 rule, or LIP section 3.6K2. Areas above 18 feet will only account for 60% of the areas below 18 feet. Here is a height demonstration of the detached structures. The tallest one will be 13.5 feet, well below the 18 feet allowed. Story poles were established in April of this year, and this is going to be a series of story pole photos here. These are of the accessory structures looking southwest. This is of the single-family residence looking east of the front there. Here's a view looking south with, you can see that the pitch roof will become a square flat roof as part of the project. And here is looking southwest. And that where you can see part of the addition that was in under code violation when it got established without permits. That's the end of my presentation. Staff recommends adopting Planning Commission Resolution 2239, approving the project as conditioned. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tyler. Disclosures, Mark?
Yeah, I spoke with the applicant a couple of days back, and I didn't learn anything new.
Jeff?
None.
None? Dennis?
None.
John?
None.
Okay.
There is one. I did talk to Danny Errico Friday. He explained that he was going to, I think, Australia, and he wouldn't have time to be at the hearing. And did I have any questions? I didn't at the time. So, but I did talk to the owner.
Okay. I have a speaker slip here from the applicant who's available if we have any questions. He doesn't necessarily need to make a presentation. Do we have any public speakers on this?
There are no public speakers.
There are no public speakers.
But Andrew Ferguson is available to answer any questions.
Right. Okay, good. All right. We'll bring it back up to the commission table then, close the public hearing. And who's got some, if we have any technical or factual questions for staff, let's lead off with those. Anybody?
Okay, I looked at the elevations, and they seem to fly in the face of LCP Policy 3 remodels, which the city has adopted. In that, and we went through an extensive set of hearings to adopt this at the time, about what you can replace on a structure and the structure framing without considering it a new wall. And it appears to me that we're massively over the two-thirds rule, the 50% rule, because, and if you look at where the elevations are, if you look at A2.3, you'll see on the top of the top elevation, you see the old house and the new house. And one's got a flat roof and one has a pitched roof. Now the remodel and addition section says that number 1A procedure that you can't replace more than 50%. And it also says on number 1, in general, and I'm quoting, in general, an exterior wall segment per story shall be considered removed if any of the framing members are removed, replaced at any point from the top of the foundation to the top plates of the wall. Well, in this case, all of them are. The second floor is you have windows where the roof was. You have a second floor that starts before it was before. Okay, so you have removed basically the whole wall because you took off the head plate. And there's 4 more descriptions in here. One is under C, increasing, decreasing the height of an exterior wall or altering the roof line unless it can be demonstrated that no structural alterations to the existing wall are proposed may not be done, basically. And that's what was done with this house. You took a house with a pitched roof and you made it square. On every wall, all the way around it, including what appears to be in the last photo you showed, you may not use moment framing. And there's a picture of one. So I don't think this house requires or qualifies as a remodel. And I think it's very, very clear. You've removed the head frames. You look at this one diagram, they're not the same house. You have what's pitched is now flat. You have windows in places they weren't there. You know, it's not even close. Now when we get a diagram shown in here on the walls that weren't moved, of course they weren't moved. They were removed, technically, according to policy number 3. And I really don't have a huge objection to a house where it is, what it is. I have a couple questions on what the original size was, but this is the most egregious violation of LCP policy number 3 I've ever seen in 14 years, 15 years. And I don't know how you can try to, the architect can give us a reason, but procedure A1, AC, 1C and 1E, and also procedure B were violated, every one of them, very clearly.
John, before we hear from Tyler on this, I just wanted to add in, I observed a lot of the same stuff independently, and I also would call out just a big question mark on the same LCP policy 3, section C3, quote, when one or more studs are removed, replaced, or sistered in, the removed portion of the wall shall include half the distance to the next stud on both sides of the affected studs. And the reason that seems significant in this case is the way they've accounted for what has been kept and what is being replaced is very fragmented. There's a small portion kept and another small portion replaced and a small portion kept and another portion replaced. And I just wonder, when you're counting each of those, you're going halfway to the next stud on either side. I'm skeptical that has been counted accurately throughout the whole, and you're so close to 50% in the numbering anyway, that gives me concern. So, what say thee? Okay, it looks like Tyler wants to defer to Andrew Ferguson.
I'll answer a few questions first.
Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, commissioners. So I'm the applicant for the project, Andrew Ferguson. I'm going to start with John's comment regarding the elevation on 2-3. So on A23, that's the rear-facing elevation. On the 50% plan, that whole wall is being demolished as part of the 50% plan. So there's nothing being saved on that entire face of the wall. That's all being counted as new wall, new construction. Does that make sense? So it doesn't, we're not trying to keep any of the existing structure in that portion of the building.
Yeah, and I just want to point out to you, I just use that as one example.
Yeah.
I think all 4 walls are that, all 4 sides.
Correct, okay. So, and then to answer Chair Hill's comment regarding the, kind of the half of the stud or half of the distance, 8 inches. So those small sections that you were describing, or the new openings, new doors, new windows. So those are oversized by 8 inches on each side compared to what the window size is. So technically it's about half of 16 inches, which is a bay of a wall. So those are all oversized. So actually they should be very accurate. I didn't, go right to the edge of the new window. We oversized them by about 6 to 8 inches each for each new structure. Because we're anticipating the new beams on the side, or the new posts on the side of the new openings. So in regards to the flat roof portion, so this house, the idea behind this whole thing was to cut the house off at the top plates. Top plates are at 8 feet. All new doors and windows go up to the top plates. Top plates have always been the key to existing walls. In my understanding of this code, it's changed over the years, as I agree, John. It's kind of difficult to follow. So the top plates around the other parts of the building remain. The new windows go up below the top plates. And then there's a new, basically, the new wall is, the new roof members are put on top of that, you know, the existing plates. So the existing plates remain. But there is an additional little beam, you know, or small cripple wall, let's say, added to that top plate. So that is going to basically hold the new flat roof. So the top plates remain, which has always been kind of the trigger, in my understanding. The preliminary structural plans have gone through building and safety, have been approved as compliant with the 50% rule with this detail and this design in mind. So that's not part of this staff report, but that has been done by Yolanda. So I'm here to answer any additional questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ferguson. So also following up with either Tyler or Richard, one of the items in that policy 3 says that the use of a moment frame triggers this. John mentioned it. How are we looking at that here?
The moment frame is at the rear of the property, and that whole wall is being counted in this application. So that whole wall that the moment frame is holding up is being counted in the demo calcs.
But it's not the wall that counts. It says, this is, the moment frame is under the sections,
Is that correct?
Yeah, the area where the new moment frame is going is counted against us.
They're doing an
Okay.
addition on the whole.
I get it, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I think.
We're including that moment frame as part of the new building. Yeah, the moment frame is in part of the new construction of the building. It's not part of the remodel portion.
it says the use of a moment frame. It doesn't say.
Well, no, but John, it's
Where?
just, if you're using a moment frame, it is automatically counted against the 50% threshold. And what he's saying is that
For
whole
the
side
whole
is,
wall.
that whole
And
wall
then-
is already
Yes.
counted.
That whole wall is becoming an addition.
Yeah.
So it's the whole wall on that side is counted.
Okay, and then,
First and second.
we need to also go on, and this has to do with that moment frame. You can't change the foundation. Okay, if it's tied into the other foundation and provides structural support
You can add to the foundation with an addition.
with a tie-in that provides structural support.
Yeah, so that detail, I don't think was provided to planning. And if I could, I just want to kind of reiterate about planning's kind of purview in this. So what a planner does is we take a look at the demo plans and we take a look at the elevations and we kind of compare based on that, try to make sure that the demo plans match what we see on the elevations. That's the best way a planner can do it with architectural plans. That's why we have the subsequent building plan check submittal, so that preliminary structural plans are then submitted to Yolanda, who first compares the structural to the architectural to make sure they jive, and then two, also does her own review of the 50% remodel policy. And in this case, they were approved because their referral came back completed.
I can go through each one of these plans and show you, oh, well. You go to A22, A23, you compare the two buildings, and there is absolutely no question that they're not the same. And on the diagram on policy 3, structural changes have taken place.
The areas where structural changes are occurring, we've subtracted
Well,
them.
show me one of these 4 walls where there's no structural change. It's gone from a pitched roof to a flat roof. Which means you go by floor, you're removing 100% of the second floor.
We're removing
because you're
100%
cutting
of the
your,
roof.
what?
We're removing 100% of the roof rafters.
Yeah, it is
None of
common.
the walls.
You do see, you do see these common in remodels where a lot of times they modernize with a flat type of roof. It's actually, right,
happens
Richard,
a
pretty
lot.
common in the city. And the way to do it is the way Andrew was explaining, which is as long as you don't touch the top plate and you just remove the membrane on top of the top plate, then technically you're within the allowance of the remodel policy.
So they're keeping all the top plates and just adding a cripple frame on the top of it.
For the new roof.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the walls basically stay as is, except for the new areas where the doors and windows go in, which is being counted against, the 50%. So
You're sistering.
it looks like a different house because the roof
You're
changed.
you're not sistering in here. You're leaving these walls and you're putting something on top of them. You're not sistering them together. There's no support.
As far as.
On the second floor.
At this current date, no, there's the structural plans
That's
that
not
were
what the-
remodeled.
That's not what the drawings show.
Where there's new openings, we have to put in new posts and headers but the other existing walls will remain the same.
No, they get taller. They get sistered to.
Yeah, but.
You're not
that
allowed to
is
sister.
I agree, what is the definition of sistered in? Sistered in is usually next to that. There's no definition about the top plate above the top plate.
Yes, there is. On page 4 of this thing, it shows you exactly what each item is and what sistering is.
And can you read that again? I'm not familiar with it.
It's LCP Policy 3 Models and Additions, adopted by the city December 17, 2014, in the Planning Department Manual.
And what is the definition of sistering?
And what item were you referring to? Item 3, you said?
Policy number 3.
And does it specify,
It says removing, replacing, or sistering,
does it define
or
sistering?
adding new frame materials, such as studs, plates, sills, upper cripples. It gives a whole list of them, and it's got a diagram of what each one of them looks like.
It lists upper cripples as sistering?
Upper cripples are different than sistering. I guess I'm not a carpenter.
Yes, that is correct. They're not the same.
They're not the same.
But they
what
are
the policy's
listed
been.
as disqualifications. You wanna read it?
That's my question. Yeah, so it says.
I'll read it to you.
Upper cripples,
Removing, replacing, quote, sistering in, or adding new frame materials, such as, but not limited to, studs, king studs, headers, window sills, green sills, top plates, upper cripples.
okay, so just tighten up the sentence
And then there's
into
a
one thing,
diagram.
or the addition of ... upper cripples,
Yeah,
that counts.
yeah. I mean, it's
John,
in, it's
again,
in,
I
it's
see-
in,
I see
it's in
Adrian's
our
up to bat
staff
here.
manual. I'm
let's hear
not
from
making
Adrian.
this up.
John, let's hear from Adrian.
All right, so I think we're talking about two different things when we are talking about sistering.
Let's talk about upper cripples.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. But sistering means putting two studs side by side. And so what Andrew is talking about is not sistering, but is adding another wall on top of the existing wall.
Yeah.
The policy talks about cripple walls, but it is specifically referring to cripple walls on top of doorway openings and window openings.
Does it say that, John?
It does not.
It was, I wrote the policy, so the policy intended to talk about cripples as it talked about the framing above a window and above a door opening. It was never meant for that to be intended to be applied to a wall built up on top of another wall. So I think what Andrew is saying is that the existing framing would remain and the structural integrity of that wall would remain as the components of the wall will still be there. You're still going to have the bottom plate, the studs, and the top plate, which make the component and the structural element of that wall. And so those items will remain, and they're building a wall on top of that.
You're saying.
Okay, well, hang on, John. My understanding of a crippled stud is that it's a stud that is in the air and doesn't reach down to the floor plate. So it's not like a king stud or a jack stud. And in that case, wouldn't those studs above the top plate be, or are we calling the top plate a bottom plate now?
So the cripple walls, there's two, I guess, two parts of a cripple wall for a window. It would be the portion of the wall below the sill plate, and then there is going to be a cripple wall on the top of the header. So, but again, the whole idea or the reason the policy even mentions cripple walls is because those would be contained within the bottom plate and the top plate. And so as long as the bottom plate and the top plate would remain, and the structural components within that space would remain, that portion of the wall is considered an existing wall to remain. Now, if you were to eliminate the header for a window, for example, or remove any of the king studs that support the header, then the whole segment of the wall that supports that opening is considered a new segment of the wall. And that portion is, considered a demo. But we're talking about something that was not contemplated when we wrote the policy, and that is building a wall on top of an existing wall. And that has been done in many ways, but the more typical way that we've seen it is where they put a beam, like an engineer beam, on top of the existing wall, and again, provided that you're not structurally altering the wall that's holding that, we're not counting, we haven't been counting that segment of the wall as a demo wall.
Well, qualitatively, how many times, I think you're saying we've done this way before, like many times, or once or twice, or?
We see it from time to time. We don't have a lot of these remodels where they take it to the 47% or the 49.9% as we've seen in the past. So we see a lot less of those, and we see a lot of the smaller remodels. But in this case, the other thing they're doing is removing the roof essentially and building a new roof. And like Tyler said, we have seen it where they modernize a style of a building. They take the pitch and they make it flat. Those are a lot more rare. I would say maybe, a handful of those projects a year.
Okay. Well, let me ask you.
Do you have more on this, or have we kind of like put the tissue
No,
on the
I
table?
just want to read it. You say, oh, gee, this isn't the way we wrote it. Well, this is the way it was written, and it was adopted, okay? And it went through a bunch of hearings, and 1A says, quote, adding new frame material to a wall, okay? You're saying you slice the wall off at 4 feet and add another 4 feet. Essentially is what you're saying, but you say that's not sistering because somehow you're balancing these 2x4s on top of each other. You're not connecting them other than that.
No, that's actually very different from what I'm saying, because what I'm saying is you have to keep all three of these components intact. Bottom plate, a stud, and a top plate. You have to keep those components intact.
Aren't.
If you were to remove the top plate, right? You cut through that wall and remove the top plate, that entire segment where you remove the top plate or the bottom plate is considered a replacement wall.
Okay, well,
but what Andrew was describing is he's keeping the top plate, and then he has what he described as a crib wall built on top of the existing top plate, which will give him an additional height.
It's a 1 foot height increase to hold the new roof truss.
I think John's concern.
If you look on A23, you see 2 floors on an old building, okay? It's got a set of windows in the bottom, a set of windows in the top, and you're telling me that that roof is 2 feet? No, it's more like 6 feet, 8 feet, okay? And you're saying you're putting in 3 headers instead of 2? That is a new wall.
This wall is being counted, this entire
Okay,
wall.
well, go to the next page. Go to page A22. You're doing exactly the same thing. Exactly. You're going from a triangular shaped building to a square one, okay? And this policy talks about bulk and mass. I gotta find it in here. But, let's see here.
Is the overhang on the old house is what got you? The fact that it's hanging down and you're thinking that's plate line on the fascia out here, when it's really up here?
You don't see a wall sticking up above the roof, do you?
Well, no, Commissioner
Okay.
Mazza, you don't, but the roof comes down on, it's an overhang, so the plate level is back behind up here. At the,
No, you have a ridge beam on one, and the other one you don't.
well, right, one's a flat roof, one's
Okay,
pitched,
so
but
one
I
has-
think,
one
I think
has
the
a-
overhang's got you.
One has a top plate, a ridge beam, and
Correct.
Yeah.
The existing top plate of the existing house is 8 feet, like most typical houses.
right.
So the
So
roof
now
rafters,
now it's not.
the roof rafters are sitting on top of that. In the past, we've always removed those roof rafters and put on a new flat roof,
John?
usually under APRs.
But every single wall is this way.
John, can you read that one more time, the policy you have there? Did I hear or did I not hear some language saying, or any addition to?
It says removing, replacing, quote, sistering in, or adding new frame material.
There was no word there, any? I thought I heard you say that somewhere, no? Okay,
Any, what?
Did
It
it
says,
say-
or adding.
yeah, but it doesn't, okay. All right, I think this has been aired sufficiently. If there are other
well,
concerns or
that's
issues
another-
about the.
As I'm reading the general compliance statement, I'm just wondering whether the argument is worth all the heat. Is there any reason why this, I mean, usually we talk about remodeling when we're a situation where something's being grandfathered and it wouldn't be eligible to receive a CDP. The compliance statements basically says complies, 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 complies. Is there some reason why this is a critical issue, whether it has to be called a remodel rather than a full CDP? Is there some distinction between it?
Yeah, it had a
It's not
side
super,
yard
I don't
set-
think it's super critical, right? But there's an existing non-conforming setback.
There's one existing.
And then there's
non-conforming
some structures that are on there that are existing non-conforming, and those would also remain with this application.
Some portions of the structure that's being remodeled?
Yeah, no, that portion that's non-conforming, the setback to the house is not being remodeled. That's remaining, right?
The existing, there's a portion, a small piece of the house.
Step to the
a small
mic,
piece of
please.
the house that is within that encroaches into the required setback. That wall will be getting 2 new windows, or removing and replacing 2 new windows. But that wall, which is, can you pull up the site plan by chance?
Sure.
That's why we have to do the 50%.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, there's one non-conforming setback.
Okay, just a general comment. The LIP language gave everybody fits for several years. And the reason why staff finally developed a policy was to try to put some conformity into the way these applications for remodels were being considered. Because otherwise, the language of the LIP itself is really just not subject to consistent interpretation. So that's why this was done. It's a staff policy. It was wasn't really adopted by anybody. It went to Zoraces, but it's never been adopted like all staff policies. They're not adopted by either the city council or the planning commission. So I just want to make that clarification point.
Yes, but there was a reason for it. And I also want to point out that Section B says, a structure shall be considered a replacement structure and forfeit any legal nonconforming status if any modification to the structure requires or proposes the alteration of the existing foundation. However, the following activities shall not be considered alterations of the existing foundation. Repair and maintenance, not the case here. Physically tying the foundation of an addition to an existing foundation solely to provide lateral load support. Okay, this isn't solely for lateral load support. It's a whole new wall, okay, and it's tied into the foundation. This alone disallows, you can't alter the foundation if you want to call it a remodel. It's plain as day. I mean, I read you the whole thing. Now, Jeff says, oh, gee, and I understand what Jeff says because he and I went through all these hearings. We went over and over and over again. We had a house up on Encinal Bluffs where they were going to remodel it. They tore down half the house and the wind blew the other half down, okay? And then they claimed, oh, it was okay because it blew it down. And then we went through this big rigmarole and had all these hearings. And we came up with these rules. But they're the rules, and everybody's supposed to follow them. And to say, well, yeah, but we kind of changed it a little. It's not the way if you were planning a project and you looked up what's in black and white for 8 years, it doesn't allow it. And then when you look at these plans, you're so close to the 50%, and then you look at all these windows and doors and walls and everything else, and the second floor, as far as I'm concerned, you are replacing and adding new framing material. No matter how you cost it, you can't build the house without calling the lumber truck. You can't do it.
Adrian, were you wanting to clarify the foundation question?
Yeah, I was actually gonna look into the policy, but yeah, there are, like it was mentioned before, there's one exception to modifying the existing foundation, and that is to allow for tying the existing foundation to the new foundation for additions. And the second is for seismic retrofitting, which we've seen a lot, where the code requires that king studs be placed at corners of a building in order to allow for sheathing to be then attached to those king studs. But then you have additional way related to these king studs, and a small pad or a small foundation is then required for those corners. So that's the repair and maintenance is the other reason. But in terms of alterations, those are the only reasons that foundations have been allowed to be altered. And in this case, obviously there's an addition, and the moment frame is part of that addition, and there's new foundation related to that. My guess is that there's also a number of king studs for sheathing and just bringing it up to code, and provided that the alteration does not extend the life of the building, and we rely on the building official to verify that and to provide us with the feedback to demonstrate that that's the case.
But that's not what this says. This says solely to provide lateral support. Solely, not just by the way. It also requires, before it's approved by us, that a preliminary foundation plans have to be submitted. I don't see them.
When we say lateral support, that is seismic retrofitting. So we're actually speaking about the same thing. So, lateral support is something that's new, and that's been now a requirement in order to comply with, seismic.
I know, but it
retrofitting.
says solely for lateral support.
That's right.
Not just coincidentally.
So we're saying, I'm saying the same thing, is that alterations to the foundations are solely for lateral support. And the tying in of existing to new foundation for additions is something that's required for lateral support, as well as there are some foundation pads that are required for lateral support. So that's the only time that we would allow the foundation alterations.
You can't do this kind of work and come up to new codes without adding an HD here and there, a 5, a 3, or whatever. That's got to happen, Commissioner Mazza. There's nobody trying to,
We're not
just saying to add something to add something. The structural engineer said you need this, you need that, and that's what you have to do.
And they're not going to, this is not determinant upon them qualifying under the current codes. This is for them qualifying as a remodel. In this case, they've added moment frames, they've added additional framing material, they've added additional foundations, and it's not just for lateral, okay?
John, but
You're holding up a roof.
Those all count against the 50%. You can do them if you're under the 50%, so.
Right, and I'm saying that it's way over.
It's not.
It is way over.
They couldn't have gotten this far. There's no way.
Couldn't have gotten this far. They started the project without any permits. What do you mean
John,
couldn't
we're
gotten
going
this
in
far?
circles a little
They
bit.
put in a foundation without any permits. What do you mean they couldn't have gotten this far?
They're to us now, and you've got
Okay.
new restrictions, you've got new code.
Yeah, everything-
No,
you've got
you
new
don't. This
structure.
is whether you qualify as an existing wall, not.
Guys, John, we're going in circles here. Andrew, I think, may have an
Yeah, I just
enlightening
wanted
comment.
to just, add one comment, and I think Chair Hill had said it. The areas where there are new foundations and where the new moment frame is all counted against the 50%. So what you are reading is modifications to a wall that I'm not counting against the 50%. So of course I can't put a new foundation under those walls. But the areas that I am changing, we're counting against us, and that's the 47%. So I have the 3-foot underpin pads shown on the demo plan, so that whole area is counted against us.
But you misunderstand what I'm reading. Let me read it again. A structure shall be considered a replacement structure and forfeit any legal non-conforming status if a modification of the structure occurs to the existing foundation. Shall forfeit being a replacement structure. Not that one little section, the whole building. Okay? This is very clear.
So you're saying this is separate from the 50%?
Yeah, it says if you start messing with a foundation, you lose your replacement structure.
Adrian, Richard, do you have
It's
clarification
number
on that?
B on page 2.
Yeah, I think we are kind of going around in circles.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
we all agree that that's what the code requires, but what we're saying is the alterations are consistent with the policy.
Okay, let's Jeff has a comment. Let's see if we can move this
Not a
forward.
I have a question for
Question.
Adrian. Look, this policy's been around. It caused huge controversy when it was adopted. In a lot of ways, it was sort of trying to calculate how many angels could dance on the head of a pin. I mean, it was a very arbitrary decisions and cutoffs had to be made. But my question to you, Adrian, you were here when it was written. You've followed it through ever since. Is this consistent with is this project consistent with the way the policy has been applied in the intervening years?
You know, the only reason I'm reluctant to answer the question is because I did not review the plans. So, but the concepts that have been discussed today and the descriptions that we talk about in terms of that crib wall above the roof and the foundation work, those are all consistent with how the interpretation has been applied since the policy was adopted.
Let's leave that hanging for the moment. I think we all probably are developing ideas about that. Are there other issues or questions about other aspects of the project?
I just have one.
Mark.
Oh, go ahead.
The crib wall that's on top of the top plate, is it solely there for structural purposes for the roofing joists? That's for that support, or is it taller? It's not, it just supports the roof. That's all it's there for.
Basically it's the new structural member to support the new flat roof trusses that are gonna go on.
Right. It's not adding additional height over and above what it takes to support those roof joists.
That, I'd have to look at the structural plan and talk to my structural engineer and verify that, but basically, the overall building height is coming down, but the interior height would be increasing slightly, if that makes any sense. We're gonna do like kind of an open roof truss type of design, but,
Right.
The overall height is a bit lower, but the volume of the second story
like the interior space does get,
larger.
inside does get slightly larger, I would say. Like the volume.
But
Interior
so
space.
what is the actual height of that crib wall?
It's like 12 inches, 11 inches.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then basically the rafters or the new flat joists sit on top of that and span the 20 or 30 feet, flat roof.
Right.
So that increases your height. Those are large members, like 18 inches, because it's a large flat roof span.
Right.
So that is where that additional height comes from, basically, is the roof members plus the new structural member wrapping the house, basically.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. We've got this issue on the table. Without assuming anything, I just wanted to clarify a few things about the landscaping. There are several species of bamboo specified. I know that there's really two categories of bamboo, spreading and clumping, and the spreading types are invasive. The bamboo on this is not a spreading type, right? Presumably, hopefully. And while you're looking on that, there's also the question of the oleander in the front yard, and I don't know what all else. But the biological approval wants that front tree cover, shrub, whatever you want to call it, to be no more than 42 inches high. And right now it's pretty tall.
At the street, you saying? The front yard?
Yeah, the street side.
That all is being redone.
That's going to be all gone.
New fencing, there's new utilities going in the right of way, so that's all coming out.
I thought I saw, now I'm
L11 doesn't
I thought I
show
saw
that.
trees, some kind of trees in the front, and I was.
Yeah, so
there's three coral trees in the existing front yard. Two of those are to remain. One has to come out for the widening of the driveway.
Okay.
And then the hedge along the street, that all comes out because we have some underground utilities, and then the fencing, the existing wall is coming out.
Okay, and the trees, how close are they going to be to the new replacement structures that go up near there? They're pretty close, right?
The new replacement structures.
The accessory structures up near the street.
If you look at the site plan, the trees are about 5 to 6 feet off of the property line. The garage is set back, I believe, 36 feet from the front property line. So the existing coral trees are right on the front property line. So there's probably 25 feet of space in between.
Okay. Looking at the story poles, it looked much closer to me, but.
Yeah, the canopies in those trees are, pretty large. But 2 of those are gonna stay, 1 of them has to go.
Yeah, okay.
And I don't know the answer to your bamboo question, but we will be doing the clumping because the running is not fun.
Yeah.
Craig?
Yeah, John?
I'm looking at L11, which is the landscape plan we're approving. None of that stuff is shown as coming out. We have foliage in the street right away that takes over almost half of the street.
So there is a
Okay,
condition.
And we're being asked to approve this.
There is a condition of approval that new and existing vegetation, so that would mean the hedges that exist today would have to come into compliance. So if they're along the side or rear yard, they would only be allowed 6 feet. If they're in the front yard, they'd only be allowed 42 inches. That's a condition of approval, I think 54, if I recall.
Let me ask you this, the side yard ones pretty much are on the neighbor's yard. Are those coming out?
They're being maintained, right, Andrew?
So
Down to 6
those
feet.
are over 6 feet.
Yeah, I don't know who actually owns those properties. I mean, they kind of go in between the property line pretty well.
So are we approving those?
If they're on your property, if they're on the subject property, excuse me, they would have to be maintained at 6 feet tall for the life of the property.
Okay, well, on the landscape plan, it shows the roadway, and almost half of it is taken by foliage, which is called, it's called existing planted area linthrope or something. Is that's on the plan we're being asked to approve. It's the very first page of our, I guess, the very last page of our plans. So why are we approving this and then having conditions to take it out?
It's not that they have to take it out, it's that all the vegetation within the setback has to be maintained, in that case, the front yard, at 42 inches. So,
Okay, so why are we allowing 50% of the street to be vegetation?
yeah, it can be there, it can be there, correct.
No, I'm wondering, you're taking a street down to pretty narrow. And if you've ever driven down that street, you know that.
Yeah, so, correct me if I'm wrong, would they
So
need
we're
a-
allowing them to continue to plant half of the street
would you need
with
a-
vegetation.
At 42 inches.
It's not in the street, John.
It is.
It's in the right of way.
That
I
line
believe
is the right of way.
It's in the city's
Public
right of
Works
way?
allows, I think, 2 to 3 feet of planted space up against the property line wall is, I think, their new policy. Like, as long as there's 8 feet of space off of the street before, then you can then it's a Public Works, I believe it's a Public Works issue once it goes through
Right.
building safety plan.
They would need an
No, but
encroachment permit.
we've had this before. We did on the house on Gray Fox, the big house. On Selfridge, one off of
Yeah,
whatever. But this is half of the street,
I
half
think-
of the street easement.
I think Public Works has been somewhat inconsistent when it comes to this issue.
Yeah, well, I'm not.
But, I know. So if it is an issue, I think we can just add a condition that the landscaping within the public right-of-way be removed.
Or comply with city code, however you want to.
Yes.
It's all coming out anyways. We have the new transformer and fire hydrant going in the front yard and all of that.
So you're putting on a city right away?
The
Easement.
Edison transformer
Utility easement.
and the utility, and the new fire hydrant goes in the right of way, correct? Where everything else, yeah.
As long as you're doing some changes to the landscaping, you've got at least one big queen palm there. Are you married to that, or the landscaping ordinance now says no palm trees? So,
I would imagine I have to comply with the ordinance.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's existing, but what is he's not required to move that, but it would be probably.
No, they just can't plant new ones.
He can't plant new ones or relocate it. It would,
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you want me to get rid of it? I'll trade you that.
I'm just making the friendly suggestion that it might be safer, that's all.
Yeah, I didn't know that tree was actually still on this landscape plan, to tell you the truth.
Okay, I've got
It's on
another,
the photos too,
It is,
so.
yeah, it's going to be removed.
Okay.
I've got another one that I consider a big deal, and that is that our LCP determination on .2 MESHA, policy number 17, does not allow development on the 4-to-1 slope. And although it's not listed in the project description, there's a new stairway being built on the 4-to-1 slope down to the stream. And that's just flat out not allowed.
What sheet are you looking at, John?
What?
What sheet
If
are
you
you
look at the
looking
very first sheet.
If you look on the survey, it's existing.
No,
It's
this
not
one.
part of this application. If you look on the survey, I think it's like the third sheet of the,
It's not on any of the plans other than the first one.
the second sheet is the survey. So the site survey is of existing conditions, and that staircase shows up there. I tried to verify the date. I could not. We have
You have a photograph of
we
it.
have aerial photos of 1993. It's kind of, you know, it may or may not be there in that photo. And so I think our policy with that, and directors, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be considered existing non-conforming. And because they're not remodeling more than 50%, it'd be allowed to remain.
Are they going to build anything on the slope?
No,
Are
nothing
they
on
going to
401.
repair this stairway?
It's going to remain existing as part of the application. That's why it's not included in the project.
So you don't mind a prohibition against repairing it? Because I can tell you this, on Point Doom, there's probably 20 of them going in right now, and we're looking the other way. And we did a deal with the Coastal Commission, and it's going to bite us, because everybody is building. We have one case where they bulldozed a road down to the stream, okay? Nothing's been done about it. These trails do not exist. These stairways do not exist.
Yeah, so you just want us to add a condition, right, that they can't maintain the staircase?
They can't, well, I don't think it's there, so they can't build it, but yes.
Well,
It's been existing for at least 20 to 30 years, as far as I can see from historical photos.
but
I have no history on it, though.
Yeah, we can add a condition, though, that they cannot alter it in any way, right?
Yeah.
Or maintain it.
Well, if it's functional staircase and it's been there, then you want to be able to maintain it in a repaired, functional state, right? You don't want it to be unsafe.
Correct.
So,
We are not allowed to go anywhere near.
okay, but if it's there,
It's
already there.
It's not a required staircase, so it's not that they need it for the use of their property. So if it's not repaired, it just won't get used.
All I can tell you is the guy that lived there before was 90-something years old. He didn't build that staircase.
Well, maybe he built it 30 years ago when he was
When he was
in his 60s.
68. Okay.
But to answer the question about the bamboo, if we want to
Yeah.
go there. So one of the bamboos is a invasive species, and that's the black bamboo. And the Buddha's belly bamboo is an ornament, non-invasive plant.
so we're going to not do the invasive one?
I agree with that.
Okay.
Do we have this, does
So-
our city biologist look at these landscape plans?
Yes, they do look at the landscaping plans, but sometimes they will miss a plant species here and there, and that's because there are a lot of plant species on landscaping plans, so they go through them, but they're bound to miss one or two.
All right. I think we have a motion on the floor or no? Yes?
No.
We don't. Does it?
Staff recommendation.
Microphone.
I move the staff recommendation, staff recommendation.
Did you want the addition to the all landscaping shall be removed from the public right of way? Did you want that added?
You're doing that anyway, correct? So I'll second staff's recommendation.
Well, so we're not going to have any of these provisions. You're just going to okay this.
Well, we've got also the provision against using the invasive bamboo.
That's not in his motion.
Well, that's
It's not in my motion, but, it's fine. If you want to put it in the motion, I don't care. The point is that anybody who would plant invasive bamboo is insane and probably shouldn't get a permit for anything. But if you want to prohibit people from doing stuff that no sane person would do, fine, put it in.
There is a condition that the biologist does put in that no invasive species are allowed already. We can tailor it specifically towards that species if you would like.
Plenty of people are not insane, but merely ignorant. So that's all we're talking about.
Well,
Anybody who's lived with it.
so let's clarify the motion.
The motion is that there would be a condition against having invasive bamboo planted as part of the project.
Okay, is there a condition about the palm tree? Well, I didn't make the motion. I'm asking.
You said no, right? He said no.
Okay, and there's a condition about the landscaping on the city right away.
He's taking it out.
He's not taking anything out until you put it in the motion.
No, there is no permit there is no permit at all to landscaping in the public right-of-way, John. You can't get adverse possession of public property, so it's not something that's being permitted.
Yeah.
Well, you haven't driven around Point Doom in the last 30 years. So he gets to keep it. Is there a condition in there about the stairway?
Not in my motion.
Okay.
The stairways is.
I don't know why you guys like appeals. I really don't.
So the motion is staff's recommendation, and then add a condition that says invasive species of bamboo shall not be allowed on the property.
Second, is there a second?
Correct.
Second.
Oh, okay, and you're good with that. All right, I think we're ready to call the vote.
Commissioner Jennings,
Yes.
Vice Chair Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Mazza,
No.
Commissioner Wetton,
Yes.
Chair Hill,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right, with that, I'd like to take a quick break, whatever the shortest break is that could accommodate people. I'd like to say 5 minutes. Is that enough, or? Okay, so.
It takes that long for us to go down to the bathroom now.
You go the one behind
Yeah,
us.
let's see. So it's 9:03. Let's call it 9:10.
Okay, come back at 9:10, and please do not approach or speak to the commissioners during the break.
Everybody turn off your Zoom cameras and. It's 9:10. Let's get back on the ball. Okay, we're back. We're now on to item 5D, zoning text amendment number 22-001, amendments to the Malibu Municipal Code Dark Sky Ordinance to update light trespass allowances. And I see we have a staff report.
Yes, hi, good evening again, Commissioners. The next item is a proposed amendment to the Dark Sky Ordinance. A little bit of history about the project. On October 15, 2018, the Dark Sky Ordinance became effective. On January 10, 2022, the City Council extended the compliance period dates. All parcels other than the service stations are now required to come into compliance by October 15, 2022. On February 28, 2022, the City Council initiated this amendment to the Dark Sky Ordinance in order to reduce the light trespass requirements for commercial properties along the right-of-way. The gas stations in particular were having trouble with compliance with the initial trespass standard, which was the 0.25 foot candle limit at the property line abutting the right-of-way. Staff worked closely with the city's lighting consultant, James Benya, in order to craft this language. The new language is intended to maintain the original intent of the ordinance and reasonably allow commercial and institutional properties to come into compliance. The only changes are to MMC section 17.41.050G, adding the following language shown in red here. So I'll just go ahead and read it. So G is regarding allowable light trespass, and number 1 is from any property onto a residential property, ESHA buffer, Pacific Ocean beaches, public viewing areas. The maximum allowable light trespass shall be 0.1 foot candles or 1.076 lux, measured facing the light sources in any plane and at any height or place on the affected property, ESHA buffer, Pacific Ocean, beaches, or public viewing area. Similarly to 2, which deals with non-residential properties, we added from any property onto a non-residential property other than the public right-of-way, ESHA buffer, Pacific Ocean, beaches, and public viewing areas, the maximum allowable is 0.25 foot candles or 2.69 lux, measured in any plane at any height or place on the affected property facing the light sources. In addition to those 2 modifications, we're adding sections 3 and 4 to that section. And then that is to, from any commercially or institutionally zoned parcel onto a public right-of-way, the maximum light trespass shall be 0.25 foot candles, 2.69 lux, measured in the vertical plane at or above 36 inches above the top of the opposite curve of the public right-of-way and facing the property. If there is no curve, the measurement shall be taken at the edge of the paved road closest to the line at the property line, directly across the street, or the property line, or whichever is closer. If there is a divider, the measurement shall be taken at the curb of the divider facing the property. And then number 4 basically just exempts residential properties. So from any residentially zoned property onto the public right-of-way, the maximum allowable light trespass must not exceed 0.25 foot candles measured in any plane at any height, which is consistent with the current standard. So with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 2239, recommending that the City Council approve the ZTA 22001 to update the Dark Sky Ordinance light trespass requirements for commercial and institutional zones.
And I would just like to add that the whole impetus to this, and Tyler touched on it kind of briefly, was the gas stations. Tyler was reviewing the 5 remaining service stations. The 5 remaining service stations, they had all applied for a deviation request. And we had scheduled that for a public hearing. before the Planning Commission, because in the dark skies ordinance, if you can't meet the ordinance, the appropriate mechanism is what's considered a deviation, which goes, in this case, before the Planning Commission. So those deviations were prepared. Were the reports distributed? I forget. They were, right? Or just the notice? Yeah, notice went out. Okay, so just the notices went out, and there was concern raised by members of the public as well as some council members. Essentially, we stopped moving forward on those so that a consultant could be retained. We ended up retaining Jim Benya, who had worked with the city to prepare the ordinance. And as the reason for bringing Jim back on was to have him look at those 5 gas stations and offer a professional or expert opinion on whether or not those gas stations required the deviation. And in his opinion, he modeled the gas stations many different ways and found that they're really, given the canopy's relationship to the public right-of-way, there was not really a practical way short of lowering the canopies, which then wouldn't work because of vehicle clearance, to address this bit of light trespass. And as Jim explained at the last city council meeting, this is not something that you're going to notice because of the fact that these gas stations and service stations are right next to public street, which is already lit, Pacific Coast Highway. This is something that I want to say that it became more apparent when he modeled the gas stations on his software in the absence of surrounding development. So if you were to think of go out in the middle of the desert, plop a gas station down, nothing around you, yes, there's light trespass. And it would be noticeable. But in the case of these gas stations and the particulars about them, Mr. Benya explained that it's not something we would notice. It would still achieve the goals of what the city did with this dark skies ordinance. And so that, and he also brought up some of problems we might run into with commercial driveways and light requirements, and that's what got us here. So I want to make certain that folks understand that we started all of this, and the council asked us to go down this route specifically because of the gas stations and their request for a deviation of not being able to meet the code, and then us having that verified by the city's expert.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Maybe it might, I know we don't have to do disclosures, it's an ordinance, but it might help if anybody has something they want to share by way of sort of a quasi-disclosure. Anybody you've talked to, any expertise you've engaged? I mean, I'll just say I did that study that I shared with you guys as sort of informal, like, just want to see what these readings actually mean, what these numbers are, how does the light meter behave, et cetera. And I came to a few conclusions. No, I guess not. Okay, then public speakers?
Oh, you don't want them?
What?
Well, I thought you were calling for it.
No, if you have something like a disclosure or something you want to share, that by all means.
Well, I worked actively with the Dark Skies group for 5 years on this project. Went to many, many meetings.
Okay, let's see. So we have here 2 slips. Looks like Jimmy Chavez and Pat Healy. So Jimmy, welcome. You get 3 minutes.
Good evening and thanks for your time. Apologies if this is not the right forum for this. I've spoken with Tyler a couple times. And I think I represent Duke's Malibu as the managing partner there. We will be trying to file a deviation if possible, but just more here to voice concerns for our employee safety with this ordinance and guest safety. being at Los Flores and PCH, already one of the most dangerous intersections in the county of Los Angeles. We're just pretty concerned with less light and some of the parameters that we're going to be forced to meet as it is now. So that is our first and foremost concern that I wanted to voice, and apologies again if this is not the right forum for that or if I needed to be at a different meeting, but wanted to put those to you all. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. We might have a question or two for you, so, but let's let Pat go first.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Pat Healy, speaking for the Malibu Coalition for Slow Growth. Instead of modifying the ordinance to allow light trespass, leave the existing ordinance in place, and if there's a justified, exceptional reason that trespass must exist, a variance could be given if compliance is not possible and is really, really needed. If you change the ordinance, you're giving property owners the right to trespass. Our concern is if allowed, it will become a common occurrence and cumulatively it'll have a negative effect on Malibu's dark skies. As far as residential single-family homes are concerned, all the lighting has to be fully shielded and facing downward and has to be 3,000 Kelvin or less. So I don't see why or how there is any light trespass. And the same goes for ESHA. I mean, if lighting is close enough to the ESHA buffer, and is fully shielded, it should remain on the property that it's on. I understand the gas stations and their inability to comply, but along PCH, residents should have to comply with the ordinance without amending it. And also, our residential streets were always to remain dark, and you're giving people the right to trespass off their property, which shouldn't be allowed. It should all be contained on site. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Pat. Are there any other speakers, potential speakers? No? Okay.
There are no other speakers present.
With that, we'll close the public hearing, and
Could I ask a question of one of the speakers?
yeah, go ahead.
Jimmy Flores, can you come up here?
Yeah.
I don't quite understand your concern because it appears to me the intersection of Los Flores and Coast Highway is super lit with a gas station and a whole bunch of streetlights. What would that have to do with your property itself?
We have lighting in our parking lot that would need to be modified to, we've been wanting to add more lighting for safety, theft, which we deal with quite a bit in that parking lot. And then with employees crossing the street, it is dark as it is lit now. And so losing light, existing light, we feel will further impact the danger of that situation for young people, specifically young females at night, walking to their cars, or even within the parking lot. They're allowed to park in the lot certain times of the year, the week, and without light, yeah, that's
okay. But it's mainly you say that the intersection itself, walking across the street, isn't lit brightly enough.
It's not lit very well, and yeah, there's near incidents or incidents all the time at night in broad daylight at that intersection, but also at night. You know, one of our longtime regulars, Mike Bennett, was hit and killed a year and a half ago at that very intersection. So.
Yeah, John, there's a lot of light at Rambla where the gas station is, but at Los Flores, just a short way over, it is a little bit darker.
Okay, thank you.
That raises a question that maybe staff might have an answer. I know that there's some improvements discussed for that intersection, Caltrans, something. Do you know if lighting is any part of what they're proposing there?
I would have to find out and follow up with the commission. I don't know. That would be something for our Public Works Director.
Yeah.
He hasn't approached me on that particular intersection.
And that might be something that, Jimmy, you might want to coordinate with them and see what they might know about that. Now, so as a general thing, I feel like there's sort of two categories of things that we're here to talk about, and maybe we could talk about them separately. One being the gas stations, and one being the other light standards for trespass that involve the residential changes and whatnot. And so, does it make sense to just say, let's talk about the gas stations first? Or vice versa?
I think it makes sense to talk about the gas stations first, but the second category, are you proposing we ought to discuss the general residential dark skies ordinance provisions, or are you just speaking about this particular change that's being proposed?
Well, we have the particular proposed changes about allowable light trespass and
to the public right-of-way.
Well, there are four categories there's the right-of-way, there's from one property onto another residential property, one onto a commercial or institutional property. They each have a little bit different standards. And maybe as a threshold question, can we clarify, this would be for Tyler or Richard, where we have these new proposals, for example, G1, that the standard shall be from any property onto a residential property or ESHA buffer, et cetera, that it shall be 0.1 foot candle. Is it just that we had no number before and we're finally putting a number on it now, or are we changing it from 0 to 0.1?
No, that's in black.
0.1 exists.
That's already
yeah.
been adopted.
The 1.076 was added by the consultant because, like, when you use a light meter, and I haven't used one, but according to him, it usually is measured in lux, and so we included the lux measurement as well. And then it provides more specifics on how you would measure. That's all that changes to that specific section. So
it's always been on that particular
0.1.
item, 0.1, and then the others.
To ESHA and residential properties,
Yeah,
it's 0.1. Mhm.
Okay.
Well, let me make it clear. Everything in black is an ordinance right now. Red is the only thing that's changing.
That's correct.
If we change it.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I ask Richard a question?
So maybe we're talking about gas stations first?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what I was going to ask. 5 out of 6 didn't pass. What did the sixth one do to make it qualify?
So on paper, they complied. However, I'm not qualified to do a final inspection. And part of Jim Benya's contract with us is that at one point, once we get all the gas stations into compliance, in reality, we're going to have him do an inspection on all 6. So it includes that last one, just to verify that they meet the trespass. I have an assumption that they may also have struggles because they have the same issues as all these other stations. Their canopy is right next to the property line. So, you know, you could safely say, because of these other gas stations that are having such a hard time making that, you could safely say that the trespass is probably going to be questionable with them too. However, on the photometrics that they provided to us, it was demonstrated to be compliant with the ordinance.
Now, was the gas station at Trancas considered any differently? Because it's the only one that isn't surrounded by light.
That one also is having trouble with the trespass.
Okay. Now, so I don't know what other questions you have. They have trouble with trespass. Does any other city have gas station requirements that people have been able to meet?
I don't know the answer to that directly. According to our consultant, we do have one of the strictest ordinances he's ever seen, and he's worked on many, according to him. So we did look into. We were tasked at one point to look into the city of Laguna Beach, and their ordinance was rather general. Ours is actually much more specific in that we actually name actual light measurements, and because of that, it actually makes it a little more complicated. So we're going to be requiring photometrics, which only can be done by a lighting engineer. And so that's a layer that those other cities do not have. It's more general in terms of their lighting.
Now, that brings up a question to me. How many people have a light meter, and what do? Go out and take a picture of your light meter? I mean, we don't have, as far as I know, we don't have any compliance at night. So
yeah,
by adding these lux measurements, does that mean that we won't be able to nobody will have to comply with anything because you can't measure it?
Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in the future, we're going to be hiring more contract staff to do inspections, including the code enforcement aspect of this ordinance.
Right, that's one of the items we're going to bring back to the city council is an item on enforcement and problems. However, the reason for these additional specifics is that the city has a light meter. We'll probably be purchasing a new one after discussing this with our city consultant. As Tyler mentioned, the plan is to bring our consultant out once because it's not cheap to get him out here. So we wanted to try to do all the gas stations at once. But our consultant has offered to train city staff on how to use a light meter and take measurements, and then also maintaining the proper calibration of that light meter so that it can do this type of work. And so the purposes of these specifics are twofold. One, it's going to have a place in enforcement, but also for the final inspection of gas stations, commercial parking lots, anything that we inspect. We anticipate that residential will most likely be complaint driven. However, commercial properties, institutional properties, the service stations, those are going to be situations where folks are going to come to the city, submit a plan, go through a plan check process, install the lighting, and then require a final inspection. And so we'll be using this for that guidance.
Can I ask to clarify, you mentioned that you're bringing an item on enforcement. I did some study on, just to sort of bone up and see if I could understand some of these measurements and how they work and what they mean, and try to get a sense of whether these numbers that we've plugged in make sense. And I think in general they do. But so I went out and I got a light meter and I took some readings and I offered some suggestions about the community side of the enforcement for the residential stuff. Is that something that we can be talking about when you bring the enforcement item? That's not something that we need to talk about tonight, or I don't know how much I need or want to touch on that or not. And if we're talking about enforcement.
Yeah, the direction for this one is just to make these adjustments here.
Right.
So it'll come back in the future for the enforcement aspect.
Well, I have it here, so I'll just show it. This is a little light meter that is nominally accurate to within 4%. So it's I had a whole spiel about how this could work in the community, and you could sort of, if you had one of these, you could make a presumptive case that in many cases, if you're way out of the ballpark, you'd be like, yeah, okay, you've got to change something. And you'd only need the expert when it was really a close call. So I'll make that case more seriously.
Yeah, you can go on eBay and buy a non-digital camera for about $5 and look in their meter.
Yeah, no, this is supposedly, prosumer.
Yeah, my real question there was, are we getting this? We're going 1.076 lux. Is anybody going to go to 3 digits out on a light meter to bust somebody? I mean, are we getting too far down the line on dividing lines? I don't know. It's just a compliance question, or 0.269 lux. Why not 2.5? I mean, that's the only. The way to get out of a traffic ticket is to claim the cop's radar gun isn't working.
John, they're keying it to the foot candles. Those are the simple numbers. And
okay,
so that's what makes
it just seems we're putting this in a code, and it's an easy way to get out of a code. One of my biggest concerns here, and I think we're probably done with gas stations. I don't know.
I'm not.
Okay, go for it.
I, for the life of me, can't understand why they can't comply.
Yeah.
I really can't. I'm with Ms. Healy over here. I'm really strong on this thing. I went on those tours. I think it's very important that these people follow it. They have thumbed their nose at us for a long time. And to say that they can't change lighting is incorrect. The only other way that I would even think about making a change is to have another late or an evening tour with our lighting consultant and go to the service station and point out to me exactly what you're talking about with the light wash and the right-of-way and why you can't change the other 32 lights in there in that canopy. And if you've got to have some kind of lighting that's got to be out by the curb, I guess you get that string of lights or 3 or whatever it is. But I cannot understand why these guys can't jump in. I'll tell you what, this is what I tell everybody. When I watch the weather, because I'm a weather weenie, and I watch Dallas Rains, and when he does his nighttime map of the temperature, you look the whole coast from Ventura to Oceanside on his map. What do you see on that map? Nothing but light, except here. Except when you start at Oxnard, up by the base, and you go all the way down here by Santa Monica, or just past the old job at Tuna Canyon, and the light starts. We're pretty dark, except you can see on that map where the Ralph's is, you can see where certain things are, little clusters of light on that map. The other place that's dark, Camp Pendleton. So the whole coast from here down to San Diego County is lit up, except for Camp Pendleton and us. So I can't understand for the life of me why these guys can't jump in line and try and fix that. That's that.
I'd like to follow that with, I agree with all or a lot of what you said there. And I asked staff, and Tyler, I don't know if you had time to check on this, but you know, the gas stations, by the industry's own admission, that lighting is designed to be a beacon to be seen from miles away. It's part of their advertising, and it, you know, it sort of makes sense if you need to a mile ahead on the freeway to decide whether you need to get off and get gas or whatever. But we don't need beacons in town, and it's not really part of the rural character here. So, so I asked if there was any state or federal regulations about the minimum allowable or minimum required light for whatever, for safety reasons. Is there some OSHA regulation or some security reason that some legal threshold that the light has to be X amount? And where do we stand in relation to that? Because I feel like we should probably just be doing whatever the minimum is allowed, and you know, saying you don't need to do more. So Tyler, yeah.
Yeah, I spoke to our building official about that today, and she pointed me in the direction to the California Energy Code that we've adopted. And I sent that to you kind of late. I apologize for that. I didn't myself get to read it too much. It does have a table that lists, you know, some of the standards for lighting per the Energy Code, and that's what our building official said is kind of what they go off of in the building safety side. Alternatively, our lighting consultant, he uses the Illuminating Engineering Society's standards for dark sky in the LZ1 zone. And that is a different standard, I believe, and he can correct me later if I'm wrong, than maybe what's required by the state or federal government. It's more of catered to you know, dark sky compliance. And he took a look at those and gave his own table about what the minimums would be for a gas station. And they're technical. They're measured in lux and certain variables that I myself don't have expertise on, but I could provide those to the public. We do have a statement from our consultant, and we have the Energy Code that we can point to as a standard.
Well, and just to clarify, the international, that's just a recommendation. That has no legal weight, right? That's okay. And then the Energy Code, isn't that more about efficiency and it's mainly about efficiency, and right? It's not necessarily about safety or security or whatever their concerns might be.
That's right. And the dark sky ordinance is really a planning issue. Building code is different. It's related to energy, as you mentioned. So that's probably why you'll want to point me in that direction.
Yeah, John?
To Pat's point, though, I look at this red you want to change. Gas station doesn't appear anywhere that I can see. Maybe I missed it just now, but it appears to me that we've decided that Well, gas stations can't comply, so we'll just make it the same for everybody. Now, is that a true statement? I mean, does Colony Liquor have a different requirement than a gas station?
All the service stations are zoned commercial, and so this is really catered towards zoning. And so the gas stations would fall under the commercial zoning.
So you're saying a gas station can't comply, but because they can't comply, every other commercial building in town doesn't have to comply?
That was the direction we were given by the city council, is to do all commercial.
So why do we discuss gas stations then?
Gas sta-
Obviously, the other ones could, some of the other ones could comply, but we don't want to bother with picking them out. We just say everybody be a gas station. And that's pretty much what this is.
I believe that also the reason why why our consultant recommended expanding it to other commercial developments is in situations where there are lit driveways or buildings near. For example, there's I always think of it's the old barber shop, which isn't a barber shop anymore because now it's a law offices. But on Pacific Coast Highway, there's a commercial building there, and the windows face forward like a ship, and the front of that building is right on a property line, basically. And so in the case of that building, because of the fact that of its proximity to the public right-of-way, it's going to be sharing a similar situation as these gas stations. So Mr. Benya's recommendation was based on that because of the physical relationship between the structure and the public right-of-way, like for example the gas stations, we're going to have the same problem on some commercial developments. And so that's the reason. And then I just want to be clear, and Tyler, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is no intention here of what's written to lax requirements for residential development. The reason being is that last statement there, number 4, was to make sure that they were separated out so that it's understood that they remain, I'm not speaking here, at the same requirements that were adopted as part of the original ordinance. This is not intended to lax any residential requirements.
Well, it appears that they're the same as everybody else, 2.69 lots. Number 4 says 2.69 lots.
Right, but measured at the property line instead of within the street as would be the commercial. So the current standard is all of these properties on the public right-of-way is cut off at the property line 0.25. And so we just wanted to make sure it was clear residential properties do not apply to this change.
So there's no difference between a Ralph's that's, say, 300 feet from the highway and this building you were talking about that's 1 inch off the highway as far as requirements go?
The difference being is that, like for example, the Ralph's at the shopping center here, that building is set back far enough where there shouldn't be any light trespass beyond. It's easy to design that building and not the building, I don't know about the parking lot lights, but the building shouldn't have an issue where it extends onto the public right-of-way. But where you have development that is pretty much at the property line, it's going to be hard to have downlighting that doesn't extend into the public right-of-way.
Okay, and now our signs, I assume that we're going to adjust our sign ordinance so you can't have floodlights and all this kind of stuff that's going on?
If I didn't have the mask on, you could see where I'm making a face. That to me is going to be the interesting part about this whole ordinance. The ordinance exempts sign lighting. And so, for example, with the gas stations, I went out and looked at the service station right down here, the Chevron that installed the dark skies compliant lighting. To me, what caught my eye was the signage. However, when you look at the dark skies ordinance, it identifies that signage lighting is not part of the ordinance, and I think we might have some concerns with that as we move forward and the expected results.
So if they've just put a little decal of their company logo on top of a flood lamp, does that become signage? I mean, it's kind of a half facetious question, but.
It's got to be, well, we have code requirements and limitations on signage, so it would have to be, part of what we review as the permitted sign. And with the gas stations, we have scaled them back. Obviously, other cities, I guess, allow for a lot of, chevron on all four sides, I guess, of the canopy and things like that. Our rules are stricter. We have a certain, if you look at the back of the signage section, there is a section of the signage code that is specific to service stations, so that we do scrutinize them, because I've gone back and forth with them a number of times because of what they tried to, I think at one point Chevron tried to get the blue lighting on the canopy to be part of their signage. It's
kind of immaterial, I think. As I remember when we did the signage study and took a picture of every sign in Malibu, like 10% of them were permitted. But let me ask you another question that bothers me quite a bit, and that is, you talk about the public right-of-way. Is that publicly owned streets? Is there a definition for that? Because it appears to me that if it's public right-of-way, 2/3 of western Malibu is private right-of-way. So you can light that up as much as you want? Is that basically what this is saying?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Tyler, but the opposite. This allowance is only for public right-of-way, so not a private right-of-way.
Right.
So if I'm in Sarah Retreat, I'm not covered?
You're not allowed to.
So I think,
Yeah.
yeah, you are covered. So if you look at 3, there's a lot of verbiage there. And I think it was to capture situations like that, because sometimes when you have a private road, and maybe we do need a clarification if it's just public or if it includes private roads as well that are, accessed from a lot of people. The parcels go to the center of the road. And so the way we worded that number 3 is to account for those situations. So it would only be either to the property line or to the edge of the road, whichever is near. That's where you would take the measurement to avoid spillage onto an adjacent property.
But that's only for houses, right?
Go ahead. Oh, yeah,
See,
it's
for
just
example,
for commercial, I'm sorry. Yeah, residential is completely exempt. But I was explaining in situations where commercial property might abut a private street.
okay,
We try to
but
think of those
you
as
say
well.
residential is completely exempt. If I live in Sarah Retreat, I can put in floodlights.
No, he means the exact opposite.
Where does it say if that's a private street? I don't see any provisions in here for private streets.
So
That's in the ordinance. This is
Right.
just a few sections that they've pulled out for us to modify.
Right, so if the property line met the other property line in the road, that would be the cutoff point. Because another part of the code already prohibits that, the first section of the trespass.
Okay, now why, if you have areas of Malibu that aren't allowed to have streetlights, for example, Point Doom, why do you need any trespass?
Yeah, so there's not a lot of commercial in Point Doom, right? So if you're talking about residential, those have the same standards. Any resident onto another resident is 0.1 foot candle. So is that what you mean? Or do you mean?
Yeah, or under the street.
This only applies to commercial. And residential would be at the property line.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Tyler, but if you had a commercial building in Point Doom where it was a private road, the way the code is written, because there is no public right-of-way there, and the property line would most likely be the middle of the street. We obviously don't want the lighting going that far, so this is written to say that it would have to stop at the curb. So before, we would, the light trespass would not be allowed to spill over into the street. It's actually more restrictive, because the property line's the center of the street. We're scaling it in.
But and just in reading it, and maybe I'm stupid, which is, I'll admit, but Number 4 says, from any residentially zoned property onto the adjacent public right-of-way. It's limited to one quarter of a foot candle, 2.69 lux, the same as a gas station. It doesn't say what happens onto a private street.
It does say that elsewhere in the code. It's private property to private property, you're not allowed to do any
Private
trespass.
property to private property, but this is a street.
It does say in the first two, from any property onto a residential property, and then the second is from any property
Again,
onto non-residential.
That's onto a residential property. This is specifically a residential property onto a street.
Yeah, it says from any property onto non-residential property.
So let's take it, for instance, on PCH, right? Those properties along PCH that would have light that goes onto PCH. At the property line for those residential properties, it would have to be 0.25 foot candles, not trespassed into the street at the property line. And that section 4 is just to clarify that residential properties are not included in this change. So number 2, we added the public right-of-way as non-residential. You'll see that there, and it's included with ESHA and all those other stuff. And then 3 is talking about commercial and their trespass measurement. 4 just makes sure that it's clear that residents have the same standard as before, 0.25 at the property line.
Okay, so 3 would cover the new Santa Monica College, for example.
Yes,
they can't trespass.
They can trespass up to that new allowance onto Civic Center, on the Civic Center Way.
Okay, let's hear from Dennis or I don't know which of you guys is burning more.
Let him go.
Jeff?
Yeah, I want to go back to basically what was said in the giving of the staff report. Originally, the gas stations had applied for deviations because of the perception, I guess. The council decided, no, we don't want to go that route. We want to actually address all commercial properties by means of changes to the ordinance. And so we've kind of been given our direction as to how we want to go. The only issue for us is to whether we think that these proposed changes effectively do what the city council wanted done, and keeping in mind that the city council hired Benya back when to put the ordinance together. He's the expert. He's the guy we've relied on. When this issue came up, the city went to him. He helped put this proposed change into effect, and so that's kind of where we are. It doesn't seem to me that we have an enormous amount of things to talk about here. The only question is whether what is proposed effectively does what the city council asked us to do, and I think it does. So I'm going to make a motion that we approve the staff recommendation.
Second for the motion?
I'd like to discuss it further, but
More. I think there's more discussion, but do we want a second for
Of
discussion?
course, there's more discussion.
Well, I guess it's easy enough to say staff recommendation if we get there. Dennis?
Well, I can't get past the gas station thing. These guys, it just seems to me like that we should be able to, I guess not us, but council, somebody needs to be able to tell these guys to bring the lighting down. To me, that's too easy. And I guess maybe we can't do that, but I just don't understand it. Why we as the city can't go to them and ask them to follow our dark sky ordinance that we've all worked hard on and everybody's trying to get done and help us out here.
I totally agree.
It just seems too easy. I don't understand why there's so much pushback. And like I said, if there's any, go ahead.
Benya is suggesting these changes. Benya is saying they won't be at all noticeable. So what do you want to do? You want to say, no, we don't agree with you, Benya. We think that this is this is awful and it's going to cause serious problems. I mean, you may not think that we're being tough enough or strict enough on the gas stations, but that's not really what the city council is asked to do here. That this stuff is coming to us at their direction.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
I have a technical thing that I think pulls a few things together here. I agree with Dennis. I don't think we should be giving any quarter. I heard in the council deliberations discussion about, oh, this is gonna cost the gas stations money and they can't afford it, and like none of that is relevant. But clearly one thing in the recommendation here that could be better, and whether, Ben, you put this in, I don't know, but in number 3, we're saying measure 36 inches above the top of the opposite side of the street, whether there's provisions for whether there's a curb there or not, but you're going to the opposite side of the street, 3 feet high. Well, if your light is coming from all the way over here and it's coming across the street, if you're 3 feet high, you're still getting spill beyond that for another, who knows, 20, 30 feet, depending on the terrain, the topography. You're going past the street. I don't know why we're measuring from an elevated position on the opposite side of the street, because that automatically allows light some amount beyond. I would think if you were gonna make any compromise, you would say, let's measure it from a position on the street immediately next to the property, and maybe you say it's, 5 feet high, tripod height, and then whatever light is coming down from there, we can be much more confident it's falling only on the street and not anywhere beyond the street on the other side of the street. I just don't understand why you would measure from the opposite side of the street.
Well, what I don't understand is basically what Dennis is saying, is they came along and said, oh, gee, we have these gas stations that are lighting up the world, and they claim they can't comply, which I own a couple of gas stations, they can. And then they're saying, but, okay, so they can't comply, so rather than give them a break, we'll let everybody not comply.
Yeah.
Everybody in the whole town.
Moreover,
well, there's only 5 gas stations.
Moreover, did Ryan Embry sent me a photograph of a gas station? This was, I don't know, a couple months ago. Did he send it to everybody? It was a Unical, and I think it was in Pasadena or somewhere. And it had no trespass. It was relatively dim. It was very modern looking and sleek, and the light was all self-contained. And it was just like, well, if it's Unical, surely they have their consultants and everything. They could just do the same thing at Corral. And if they could do it, then other places
But that's
could
not
do it.
my point. My point is we're not trying to fix gas stations. Gas stations isn't mentioned anywhere.
Well,
We're saying
they're among the commercial, and your point is
let's make the standard so a gas station will pass, then let everybody else do it.
yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
You may be right. I'm not arguing with you, but this staff is telling us that the council said, do it by zoning, don't do it by gas stations. All right? Now, you can argue with the council if you want to, but I don't think it's productive in this context.
Dennis?
Okay, so I got it. I get where this is headed. So I'm gonna second Commissioner Jennings' motion, and then I feel like if I've got an issue with this, I guess I get up to the podium or on a Zoom call with council, and I let them know how I feel about this, because I think that's probably where that has to go. If you really have a feeling about it like I do, she does, and a couple other people, I think the Zoom call, I'll get on there and I get my 3 minutes and I'll say what I say. But right now, I'll second Commissioner Mazza's motion. Commissioner Jennings' motion.
Okay, well, so, to me, number 3 is really the one we're arguing about. I feel like probably we would live with 1, 2, and 4, if those make sense, but 3 is the commercial properties. And John's right. If the mandate was, let's give these gas stations a break for whatever reason, why are we giving that break to every commercial property? It's going beyond, I think, what anybody was talking about at council. And maybe you're right. It's going with the zoning. Okay.
I didn't go to the council meeting. I'm just listening to what staff is telling us. And staff, in response to that specific question, said council directed that it be done on a zoning basis, not on a commercial basis.
Yeah.
And as far as I frankly don't care whether you take the measurement at the near side curve or the far side curve, or at 3 feet or at 6 feet, because Benya said you aren't going to notice the difference one way or the other. To me, I've got to.
I could support a competing motion that would accept the other sections didn't say on section 3, no, that.
What do you want to have say, because you move it to the inside curb, you mean? To the closest curb?
Well, that would be the compromise, but I'm just suggesting that as by way of being a diplomat, but personally, I don't feel like they should have to have any light trespass.
The language is convoluted, I agree with you, and that's because, when we were thinking about this, we try to account for every type of situation. If we just say public right-of-way, then private right-of-ways won't apply, right? And so maybe we can reduce that a little bit and then add a section that says private roadways are not applicable, C number 1, or whatever, because technically, if a private roadway cut a parcel in half at the center line, that would be the property line and it was a residential property, it would be 0.1 at that line. And so then it would be inapplicable, if that makes sense. So the way we wrote it was to try to account for all situations, but I think if we just stick to public right-of-way, it'll negate the private right-of-way, because that will be based on what that property's zoned.
Can I ask you?
Yeah.
Greg, what part of paragraph 3 don't you like? I'm sorry. What part of paragraph 3 don't you like? And what is it about paragraph 3? Because I'm looking at what Tyler was saying, and that's someplace completely else. I mean, if your objection is to 3, what about 3 don't you like?
I don't like it on multiple levels. One, at the level that John just raised, that we've been
That
talking
should
about.
be just gas stations.
That's an expansion that really nobody asked for, and it's only coming in as a matter of administrative convenience or something. Secondly, if they're going to be measuring the spill, the trespass, at the other side of the street, then that necessarily you're talking about a relatively flat angle that way because you're coming across the street. That necessarily is saying we're going to allow some spill on the other property. Why would you do that? If the rationale is the street is already bright, so we don't worry about that, then you want that spill to end somewhere in the street and not be going beyond.
Okay, I think I'm getting. Let me ask Tyler, what was the rationale for putting it on the other side of the street rather than on the near side curb?
Yeah, I see what you're saying now. I think Mr. Benya was that's what, in practice, what he's allowed in other cities. And so that's what he's most familiar with. That's the most common way that you still won't really aesthetically see and will still allow these commercial properties to come into compliance. So that's kind of his rationale. I don't see an issue with why we couldn't do the center of the road in that situation, because some of that language also applies to a divider, which would equal the same thing. We were thinking about PCH and how there are dividers along PCH, and we don't want to go all the way across the street. We want you to stop at the divider in that case. So if you want us to clarify it to be more towards the center line of the road, I'd have to check with Jim just to make sure it's not going to be a complicated issue. But personally, I think that might be a feasible alternative.
I think you want to do the measurement at the near curb, at the gas station or whatever it is, at the edge, the near edge of the right of way, so that any spill is coming from the source, and here's your measurement device, and it's coming down. So
the near curb still might be a little too close. From what I recall, these properties are pretty close to complying. They're like 0.8, 0.9, some of them are 1.04 foot candles. So they're already very close to complying, but the closer we get to that property line, the more likely you're going to need a deviation. So the theory behind Benya's language is that if you can't aesthetically notice with the naked eye, then it doesn't defeat the purpose of the dark sky ordinance.
Let me ask you a question.
Hold on.
If you're standing on the other side of the street, aren't you measuring the street light? You're not, you got a street light out there. Standing on the other side of the street, how do you know what's coming from the building and what's coming from the street light?
With all that ambient stuff too. Jeff?
Propose a friendly amendment.
I would measure at 5 feet on the near curb, because that would that would mean that it's light that's coming down.
For number 3?
Yeah.
Okay, so the recommendation would be staff's recommendation.
But also, I'm still a little John said something that I wondered about, that, you know, he said, well, Ralph's, as an example, is so far back from the street that you don't really, it doesn't spill anything. But nonetheless, if you're standing over at, I don't know, somewhere across the highway, you could still see the bright lights of Ralph's and the whole shopping center there. So you're getting some of that light. So I don't know, there's, at a certain point, there's kind of a non-rational or.
But they have other regulations for the on the site. I mean, it has to be shielded, and they're gonna have to change what they have
But
there.
if you're standing on the curb across the street at Ralph's, you're standing under a street light.
Yeah.
What are you measuring? The street light or Ralph's?
So a point of clarification on that, there is ways, and Jim was teaching me about this, is that, so the street light is kind of your standard, you can't really change that, but you can turn off the lights of the building. And so if we're measuring this building, you can have them, you could, you know, turn off the lights, measure the street light, take the measurement with the building light, and then subtract that, and that's the output.
Yeah, the light meter also has a relative luminance function where you measure one thing and it compares the difference.
We can't regulate hedges, and we're gonna be having to turn them off street lights?
So I guess one thing that troubles me is that we really were just talking about gas stations, and somehow it seems we too easily got into this, like, oh, we can't really just address them, we have to just do it by the zoning, and suddenly everybody, a lot of unforeseen consequences there, right? So how can we,
You could recommend staff's recommendation, but you could say, recommend the council reconsider using a zoning standard instead, just have a standard different for the gas stations. You can make that.
Or you make it more strict, and what Tyler said, well, but then you have to provide it's not a deviation. Well, so be it. Maybe you know, we just have to process some deviations for the places that really.
The recommendation could be
to start with a tighter restriction and process a few deviations
We
rather
give a
than just
deviation.
giving it away to everybody.
We give a minor mod for the front yard setback on every building ever built.
Wasn't the council reacting specifically to the need to do this? I mean, you guys got to wait till you actually get elected. I mean, you're supposed to be taking direction from the council.
Well, they were talking about gas stations. I never heard the discussion go anywhere like that, oh, well, we have to do the zoning.
So gas stations were the example, but our consultant Jim Benya also recognized that there would be a similar issue with commercial properties, and so in our recommendation, we did include commercial properties, and it was voted on to approve, 4-1, I guess, to approve with the commercial language, not just gas stations. So the gas stations were just an example of how properties can comply. If I could just add one thing too, and I understand, you know, we've went back and forth with these gas stations for a long time. We've tried to take them before with deviations. That's why Jim Benya was ultimately hired, is because he ran tests using his own metrics and his own engineering software, trying to play with the outputs, trying to play with the light fixtures, trying to make them comply, and he came to the conclusion that they could not without a deviation or this amendment, and that's why we went forward with what we did.
Well, let me suggest something. On a lot of things we do, for example, all the regulations we have on our shopping centers, we go by type of use, not zoning. For example, a shopping center has to be 10,000 square feet or larger. Otherwise, it's exempt, you know, from, say, the retail ordinance. And it seems to me that our biggest problems are gas stations and large commercial. And that we've got, on the highway, we've got a lot of small commercial, which I don't see why they couldn't comply. They're not lighting up huge parking lots and everything else. So perhaps we could say any commercial use over 5,000 square feet, something like that. Then you get rid of a lot of light that's easily controllable. I mean, somebody's, you know, with the old Kentucky Colonel or something, he can figure it out, where maybe if you're Ralph's, you can't, you know, or a gas station, you can't. I don't know. But rather than say everybody gets away with it, which is what this says, everybody goes to 2.6 unless you're next to an ESHA.
Does anybody concede that Benya's opinion is that you will not be able to notice this difference with the naked eye?
I'm having trouble with Benya's opinion. I feel like he has made assumptions that we're not privy to about how much light a gas station actually needs. Because I feel like I could I could go out there and do the mods to a gas station and put the lighting up in a way that it's only light, it's just down lighting on the canopy, it's not spilling out anywhere. It's just, you know.
Well, I think the answer to Jeff's question is, why did everybody first come up with gas stations? Because they drive down the highway and there's this giant light source. And you don't say, oh, you know, it's a shopping center. No, it's a gas station.
I feel like he's bringing something here that we don't know. That's, well, they need X amount of light for X purposes, and you know.
I mean, he's going to be at the council meeting, so I mean, he can answer those questions there.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, you know, Jeff's right. You know, the council tells us what to do, but we're only suggesting to the council. We're not writing a law here.
Right.
This is your recommendation.
So there's no reason why we can't say, hey.
So there's no reason to be voting no on anything.
No, but you can also vote, we want, which hardly ever happens, our opinion placed in the staff report, that this is too lax to do everybody.
What if I amended my motion to say that staff recommendation, but with the recommendation by the Planning Commission that that the language of the proposed change apply only to gas stations and not all commercial, and that yeah, is that good enough for everybody, or do you want more?
That's great with me. I'd like to hear that.
So that's a second?
That second, yes. I second
Now,
that.
that may not fly, that, I could go with that, and I think it'd be more likely that it would pass at council if you said gas stations and shopping centers. Or something
Okay, I'll
like
go
that.
with gas stations and shopping centers.
Wow.
Shopping centers, they're gonna go, oh my God, you know, Caverna Tony's gotta light up and that kind of
Commissioner
stuff.
Smith, do you accept that amendment?
I'm getting a little confused about what this ends up leaving in or out, or.
Well, these are.
I'm not concerned with so much with the shopping centers as I am with the gas station. So
No, I'm concerned with the
that.
council.
Like I just said, it's either me call in and go that direction, or take Commissioner Jennings' motion and stay with the gas station part of it and have them relook at it. I'd love to be around this lighting consultant and at night and see, or have somebody change the lighting out so I can see that it doesn't comply.
Yeah, so one of our recommendations is we want a field trip with Team Benya. So if I understand your proposal there, the implication would be that we're basically saying we
want dark skies.
We don't want to give the gas stations a break here, but we will give the other commercial a little bit of a break?
No,
the other way around.
The other way around. The other way around. In other words, that we think that that the restrictions, wait a minute, let me think about it for a second. Because what we're doing here is loosening, so.
So you're
so
saying,
the loosening, yeah.
You're saying we don't want to loosen the gas stations.
No,
and with regard to everything else, we also don't want to preemptively give them an extra break. We want to try to hold them to the original ordinance, the rest of the commercial.
Which means you loosen the gas stations and you keep the other commercial the same.
I think what you're saying is that you would want Section 3 to only apply to gas stations. Isn't that what you were looking for?
Sorry, my microphone was on and I couldn't hear you.
Well, I think you were saying that basically Section 3 would only apply to gas stations was what your motion was, staff's recommendation, but have, Section 3 only apply to the gas stations.
I'll go with that.
I could do that if it also was modified so that the measurement's taking place at the near curb, and so we're.
This is just a gas station. We're talking 5, 6 buildings. in
Right,
town.
but the way this is written, if we're starting to measure somewhere off the ground at the far side, we're automatically accepting spill onto the other side of the street.
I don't think
Yeah,
we
but
can
it's
go there
5
right now.
buildings.
I think if we just get them to look at the gas stations, I think that'd make all of us happy.
I'm willing
Yeah.
to accept that as, if that gets you there.
I think it's a,
Okay.
just conceptually, it's good to say, let's make a measurement that is gonna result in spill only on the street, let's not already give away that we're gonna let some
Yeah,
go
but
across.
Craig,
So,
what you're doing,
here's-
you're
here's-
taking a political body and you're nitpicking, and
Well,
I think-
but the ordinance is already nitpicking by saying,
No,
let's
I'm
put it
just
3
saying-
feet on the other, no.
The problem as I see it is, they punted and said, oh, we don't want to deal with just gas stations, let everybody do it, okay? And you come back and you say, no, it should be just gas stations. Everybody in town shouldn't be able to have more lighting just because gas stations can't comply. Everybody else can comply.
Okay, so here's the motion. The motion would be to approve staff recommendation, however, with the recommendation by the majority of the planning commission that paragraph 3 only apply to gas stations, not to other commercial properties, and that the measurement be taken from the middle of the road. Was that what you
I'd say from the near curb.
Okay, then
yeah.
I'm going with that, near curb, because it's the city council that's gonna make the decision. So, for the near curb and not from the far curb. That would be my motion.
Second that motion.
Yeah, and that, can we put in a recommendation that we get the field trip with, like Dennis is talking about, so we get.
That's not an ordinance, this is an ordinance.
Yeah,
No, but this, well,
This is part of our recommendation. We can add it as part of, as the third element of our recommendation. We've got 2 elements, we've got a third one.
Well, then I would recommend that the planning commission and the city
Yeah,
council go on
absolutely.
a field trip
Yeah.
before they
Yes.
vote on the issue.
Okay.
And that we get meals before every meeting.
Exactly. Hey, council gets it.
and planning commission stipends per municipal code.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll second the added wording in there for this. So,
Hold
yes.
on, we gotta get this straight. What, did you wanted an addition also about the field trip?
Yes.
Okay, so.
With the council.
the-
Could I just, for clarification, yeah, you're talking about from the measurement of the curb, right? Yes. Yeah, can we, so you said to the curb, but we want to be specific, so to the edge of the curb that abuts the street?
Yes.
Okay,
The near curb, yeah, and I don't know
near
what
curb.
height it needs to be. I feel like it could probably be, whatever.
yeah.
Leave it, whatever Benny is, how tall he is. I mean, that's what he put in here, whatever it is.
All right, so the motion is staff's recommendation with the following changes. Number 1, that paragraph 3 apply only to gas stations and the measurement be taken at the near side of the edge of the curb that abuts the street. And also that the consultant take the city council and planning commission on an on-site tour to examine the impacts of the proposed changes to the ordinance.
Prior to the adoption of the changes to the ordinance.
Yeah, and you may or may not need to clarify measurement at the near curb as opposed to the far curb the way it's currently written. But maybe that'll be obvious.
Okay, did as I stated, does that reflect your motion?
Can I, I'm sorry, just because I want to be clear, and so there's another portion of it that says, if there is no curb, the measurement shall be taken at the edge of the paved road closest to the line of the property directly across the street. But you also want to draw that back into the near street, right?
Yeah, whether there's a curb or not, it's on the same side.
Yeah, we don't have any gas stations with no curbs though.
True.
Sorry, Trip.
Yeah, when everybody's using gasoline. All right.
Okay, so the motion is staff's recommendation except that paragraph 3 shall apply only to gas stations, and the measurement shall be taken at the edge of the curb of the near side of the street, the near side that abuts the street, or the edge of the pavement that that is closest to the
We're really
property.
talking about the same thing. You're basically just mean the edge of the road closest to the gas station.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
And also.
Whether there's a curb or not.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we don't need to confuse them with curbs and uncurbed.
Edge of the paved road closest to the property, correct? And then that just solves it?
Yeah.
Because that might be a little different than the curb edge.
That's
right?
okay. It's gonna be
Okay.
a matter of.
I just want to make sure that's the direction.
Okay, let's do it again.
Is the public allowed to go on this tour with us, or people can go, or what?
All right.
Can't stop.
Yeah, because it's a city, it'll be a public meeting, so we'd have to allow the public to attend as well.
There you
So the motion is staff's recommendation, except that paragraph 3 shall apply only to gas stations, and the measurement shall be taken at the edge of the paved road closest to the property. In addition, the Planning Commission recommends that the City Council have the consultant take the, conduct a joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the City Council that goes on an on-site visit to observe the impact of the proposed changes to the ordinance.
I think maybe you have to specify after dark or something.
No, prior to adoption. Trevor, it should say.
Add prior to adoption. You really need that. All right.
Okay.
Does that reflect the motion,
It
Commissioner
does.
Jennings? And the second?
Second.
Commissioner Smith, thank you.
Okay, can we call the roll then, please?
Commissioner Jennings,
Yep.
Vice Chair Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Mazza,
Yes.
Commissioner Wetton,
Yes.
Chair Hill,
Yes.
motion carries.
I move we adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion and
We don't have to call the roll. We're in open session here. We can just say by acclamation.
by acclamation.
Yay.
We
So all in
adjourn
favor?
in memory of all those bright gas station lights that are going away.
By the way, we should put EV in.
EV.